Hey everyone. Welcome back to No Harry, get ready for an amazing tale. What if the Addams family bought the Dursleys' house at auction and found Harry in the cupboard? Gomez sued Dumbledore, smash that like button and subscribe for more. Here we go. Chapter 1, The Cupboard. The estate agent had described number 4, Privet Drive as a charming detached property in a well-established residential neighborhood with excellent transport links and a mature garden. He had said this with the particular strained optimism of a man who had been trying to sell the same house for 11 weeks and had stopped believing his own brochure somewhere around week 3. The Addams family had not read the brochure. They had, in fact, purchased the property entirely on the basis of a single photograph, the one taken from the street, in grey November light, which had made the house look vaguely oppressive, the garden slightly dead, and the whole street possessed of a quiet, suffocating uniformity that Morticia had described as almost unbearably bleak. Darling, we simply must have it. Gomez had signed the paperwork that same afternoon. The removal van, a thing of magnificent black lacquered wood with brass fittings, pulled by 2 horses that the driver had not been able to account for when questioned by the RSPCA, had arrived on Privet Drive at 7:45 on a Tuesday morning in July, and the street had not recovered since. Number 4's front door opened to reveal Gomez Addams first, which was always the correct order of things because Gomez Addams entering a room had the effect of a man walking into his own standing ovation. He was immaculate in a chalk-striped suit that had no business existing in the Surrey sunshine, a cigar already lit and clenched between his teeth at an angle that suggested he had been born this way, and he stood on the front step and surveyed Privet Drive with the expression of a man who had just purchased a small country and was already planning renovations. Cara mia, he called back into the house, the neighbors have already begun to observe us from behind their curtains. I think this is the beginning of a beautiful relationship. Morticia appeared behind him. She moved the way smoke moves, without apparent effort, without apparent hurry, arriving at destinations rather than walking to them. She was wearing black, as she always wore black, and the morning light seemed to make a small political decision to avoid her. She looked at the row of identical houses with their identical lawns and identical hanging baskets, and her expression was the refined pity of someone attending a very dull funeral. The curtains are beige, she said. Even the windows are apologizing for themselves. We'll fix that, Gomez said cheerfully. Behind them, Wednesday descended the front path with her hands clasped in front of her and her braids precisely placed in her face, wearing the expression she wore when she was studying something. She was 11 years old and had the eyes of a prosecuting attorney and the patience of a chess grandmaster, and she looked at Privet Drive the way a biologist looks at a particularly unremarkable species of beetle, not with contempt exactly, but with the specific absence of surprise that comes from already knowing the beetle is unremarkable before you look at it. Pugsley came after her, rolling slightly, carrying a box that was making sounds that boxes typically do not make, and behind him came Thing, skittering along the garden path on its fingertips, and then Uncle Fester, who emerged blinking into the daylight with the expression of a man who has woken somewhere unexpected and is deciding whether to be alarmed. Lurch brought up the rear, ducking through the front door with the particular resigned expertise of a man who has spent his entire adult life in houses built for people considerably shorter than himself. He straightened up on the front path, surveyed the street, and produced a sound from somewhere in his chest that was not quite a word and not quite a sigh, and communicated both. I agree entirely, Gomez told him, patting his arm. But it has potential. The moving-in process took approximately 4 hours and was watched, in rotating shifts, by 7 neighbors, 2 dog walkers who kept finding reasons to pass the same stretch of pavement, and a postman who delivered the same handful of letters 3 times because he couldn't stop looking. They brought in the harpsichord first. Then the suits of armor. Then 17 boxes that were sealed with wax and labeled in languages that the removal men, sensibly, did not ask about. Then a taxidermied bear that Fester had named Gerald and talked to throughout the entire journey from their previous home in a way that had made the removal men deeply uncomfortable. Then more boxes. Then a crossbow. Then Morticia's plants, each one in a pot of black earth, each one appearing to lean toward Morticia as she passed them like sunflowers tracking light, except that they were not sunflowers and the light they were tracking was not sunshine. By 11 o'clock, the house was half unpacked and entirely transformed, in the way that certain people transform spaces simply by inhabiting them, not through decoration exactly, but through a shift in the quality of the air, a lowering of the ambient light, a sense that the house itself had taken a breath and decided to relax into its own nature for the first time. Wednesday had done one circuit of the ground floor, catalogued what she found in the kitchen and sitting room and small downstairs bathroom, made 2 observations about the Dursleys' decorating choices that she did not share with anyone, and then stood very still in the hallway. Gomez, passing with a box, noticed the stillness. He stopped. Wednesday was standing in front of the cupboard under the stairs. It was not a remarkable cupboard from the outside. It had a small wooden door, painted white, with a standard latch. It sat under the staircase in the way that things stored in cupboards under staircases typically sit, forgotten, unremarkable, functional. Except that Wednesday was looking at it with her head tilted approximately 4 degrees to the right, which was what Wednesday's head did when something had caught her interest in a way she hadn't anticipated. "Wednesday," Gomez said. "There's something in there," Wednesday said. Gomez set down his box. He looked at the door. It was latched from the outside, which was already a fact worth noting, and there was a small bolt that had been slid home, and the whole arrangement had the quality not of a storage cupboard but of something that had been secured. Gomez had spent enough time in enough interesting places to understand the difference between a space that kept things out and a space that kept things in. "Kara," he said, which was how he addressed Morticia when he needed her specifically and immediately. Morticia appeared from the sitting room. She looked at the door. She looked at Wednesday. Something moved through her expression, briefly, like a cloud crossing a very still lake. "Open it," she said quietly. Wednesday slid the bolt. The door swung inward and the smell that came out was the smell of a space that had been occupied for a long time in insufficient light with insufficient ventilation, stale air, old fabric, the particular staleness of somewhere that never got warm enough and never quite dried out. It was dark inside, dark enough that the hallway light didn't do much, and for a moment all 3 of them simply looked into the dark. Then the dark moved. There was a boy inside. He was small in the way that spoke not of age but of something more deliberate, as if the growing had been interrupted, rationed, made to apologize for itself. He was sitting in the far corner with his knees drawn up to his chest and his arms around his knees, and he was looking at them with eyes that were too large in his face and too alert and too careful in the way that eyes get careful when they have learned that being seen is not automatically safe. He had black hair that went in every direction and glasses with a piece of tape on one arm, and he was wearing clothing that was very clearly not his, a shirt large enough to belong to someone twice his size, trousers held up by a piece of rope knotted through the belt loops. He looked at them and did not make a sound. On the wall behind him, in pencil, there were small marks. The kind of marks people make to count time. Wednesday looked at the marks for a long moment. Then she looked at the boy. "How long have you been in here?" she asked. The boy said nothing. He was looking at Gomez, with the particular calculation of a child who has learned to read adults quickly and to prepare accordingly. Gomez was looking back at him with an expression that had started as surprise and was moving through something else entirely, something that was tightening around his jaw and his eyes. "We bought this house this morning," Wednesday said, in the tone of someone presenting relevant facts. "The previous family left several weeks ago. We aren't them." The boy's eyes moved to Wednesday. Something shifted in his expression, not trust exactly, but the leading edge of assessment. He was deciding. "I know," the boy said. His voice was quiet and slightly rough, as if it hadn't been used much recently. "I heard the moving van." "What's your name?" Wednesday asked. A pause. "Harry." "Harry," Gomez said, and his voice had changed in a way that Wednesday recognized. It had gone soft and precise in equal measure, the way it did when he was very calm and very angry at the same time. He crouched down so that he was at the boy's eye level, which required some effort given that the doorway was low, and he looked at Harry with the full weight of his attention. "Harry, I'm Gomez Addams. This is my daughter Wednesday. Can you come out of there?" Harry looked at the doorway. He looked at the bolt, which Wednesday had left in its open position, demonstrably not sliding it back. He looked at Gomez for another long moment. He came out. He unfolded himself from the corner carefully, the way someone does when they're not sure they have permission to take up space, and he ducked through the low doorway and stood in the hallway and blinked in the comparative brightness. Standing up, he was even smaller than he'd looked crouched in the corner. He was barefoot. There was a bruise on his left forearm, old and yellow-green, the color of something that had happened a while ago and been ignored. Morticia looked at the bruise. She looked at Gomez. Gomez looked at the bruise and then looked away, at the far wall, and the muscle in his jaw moved once. "When did you last eat?" Morticia asked Harry. Harry thought about it with the seriousness of someone doing actual mental arithmetic. "Yesterday morning," he said. "There was bread." He added, with a faint and awful matter-of-factness, "They usually left bread." The word usually landed in the hallway like a dropped stone. Pugsley appeared at the top of the stairs, looked down, and said, "Oh, there's a kid," in a tone of genuine interest. "Come into the kitchen," Morticia said to Harry. It was not phrased as a request exactly, but it was warm, and Harry, after another moment of that careful assessment, followed her. Gomez did not follow immediately. He stood in the hallway looking at the open cupboard door. He looked at the bolt. He looked at the marks on the inside wall. He stood there for long enough that thing climbed up his trouser leg and sat in his breast pocket and did not, for once, do anything. Just sat there. Then Gomez straightened up, took a long draw on his cigar, and pulled it from his mouth and looked at the burning end with the expression of a man who has made a decision and is now simply determining the order in which to execute it. "Lurch," he said. Lurch appeared from the sitting-room doorway. "I'm going to need a legal pad," Gomez said. "And a pen. And possibly a second legal pad. And," he took another breath, "a very large brandy." Lurch produced the expression that served him for sympathy, which on his face looked roughly like an Easter Island statue experiencing mild indigestion, and went to find the required items. In the kitchen, Morticia had sat Harry at the table, a table which had not yet been replaced with the Addams' own and still had the Dursleys' cheerful sunflower placemats on it, which were already an offense, and was engaged in the unusual process of determining what food was actually in the house. The Dursleys had not cleared the kitchen entirely when they left, which suggested they had left in a hurry, and there was bread and butter and some tins and half a box of cereal, and Morticia, who made a great many things but did not often make ordinary food in the way ordinary people made it, still knew perfectly well how to put bread in a toaster. Harry sat at the table and watched her and said nothing. Wednesday sat across from him and also said nothing, which was different from the nothing that Harry was saying. Harry's silence was the silence of someone making themselves small. Wednesday's silence was the silence of someone paying complete and focused attention, which was its own kind of pressure. "You live here," Harry said eventually, to Wednesday. It was half statement, half question. "We bought the house," Wednesday said. "So yes. The Dursleys aren't coming back." "Not unless they've developed a sudden interest in compounding their legal difficulties," Wednesday said. Harry looked at her. "What does that mean?" "It means no," Wednesday said. "They aren't coming back." Something happened in Harry's face. It was small and happened quickly and he controlled it almost immediately, but it was there, a flinch of something that might have been relief, raw and ashamed of itself, as if feeling relief was something that required apology. Wednesday looked at this and filed it, precisely and completely. The toast came out. Morticia buttered it and put it in front of Harry. He looked at it, and then he looked at her. "Go ahead," she said, and her voice was the particular temperature of someone who understands that excessive warmth will frighten a feral thing but insufficient warmth will send it back into hiding, and she had calibrated it with an accuracy that was almost alarming. Harry ate the toast. He ate it carefully, not fast, not the way starving people in films eat, dramatically, but with the focused attention of someone who has learned to be aware of every bite because bites are not guaranteed. It was worse, somehow, than if he'd been frantic. Pugsley arrived in the kitchen, took one look at the scene, took a piece of toast from the rack without being asked, sat down next to Harry and said, "I'm Pugsley. I blew up my sister's ant farm last week. She hasn't retaliated yet, which is worse than if she had." Harry stared at him. "She's waiting," Pugsley said. He seemed more admiring than frightened. "It's going to be really something." "Oh," Harry said. "Do you like explosions?" Harry thought about this. "I don't know," he said. I haven't," he stopped. "That's all right," Pugsley said comfortably. "We have loads. You can try one." From across the table, Wednesday said, "After breakfast." "Obviously after breakfast," Pugsley said. Harry looked between the two of them. He looked down at his toast. He took another bite and the muscle in his shoulders, which had been held very high and very tight since the cupboard door opened, dropped approximately 1 centimeter. Fester came in through the back door with a trowel and what appeared to be good news about the soil quality in the back garden, stopped when he saw Harry, considered the scene with the shrewd benevolence of a man who has seen many strange things and long ago decided the correct response to strange things is enthusiasm, and said, "Oh, hello. Do you like beetles? There are magnificent beetles in this garden. Tremendous specimens." Harry said, "I don't really know." "Excellent starting position," Fester said approvingly, and sat down and began talking about beetles with the conviction of a man giving a lecture he considers long overdue, and Harry, looking bewildered and slightly alarmed in something else that didn't have a name yet but was in the family of less afraid, listened. Gomez came in 20 minutes later with his legal pad and sat at the other end of the table and put his cigar in the ashtray he had located from somewhere and said, "Harry. Would you mind if I asked you some questions? You don't have to answer any of them." Harry swallowed. Nodded. Gomez's pen was already moving. "Your full name?" "Harry," Harry said. "Harry Potter." The pen stopped. Gomez looked up from the legal pad. He looked at Harry, really looked at him, with the full attention of someone who has just heard something that has rearranged the furniture of a situation. His gaze went to Harry's forehead, where the fringe covered the scar but didn't quite manage it. "Of course it is," Gomez said softly, and something in his voice was very thoughtful. He wrote it down. "And the family who lived here? Their relationship to you?" "My aunt and uncle," Harry said. "Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon." "And Dudley?" "My cousin." "And how long have you lived in this house?" "Since I was 1, Harry said. "Nearly 10 years. Gomez wrote. "And the cupboard?" Harry's jaw tightened. "Since I was big enough to not fit in a drawer, I think. I don't really remember not sleeping there." He said it flatly, without self-pity, which was the worst way it could have been said. Gomez's pen moved across the legal pad for a long time. The scratch of it was the only sound in the kitchen because everyone else had gone very quiet. "The marks on the wall," Gomez said. "Those were yours." "I was counting," Harry said. When I was in there for longer than usual. I lost count a few times." A pause. "I don't really know why I kept doing it. It didn't help." "It told you the time was passing," Gomez said. "That's not nothing." Harry looked at him. There was something uncertain in his face, not distrust exactly, but the confusion of someone who hasn't had many adults treat their answer as worth engaging with. "Harry," Gomez said, setting down his pen, "I want to be very clear with you about something, because I suspect people have not always been clear with you about things, and I find that to be one of life's more correctable problems." He leaned forward slightly. "What was done to you in this house was not your fault. It was not a consequence of your behavior, your nature, or your circumstances. It was a choice made by adults who were responsible for your care and who failed that responsibility in a way that I intend to take up with several parties. Do you understand what I'm saying?" Harry looked at him for a long time. "Not really," he said, honestly. "That's all right," Gomez said. "You have time to understand it. We're not going anywhere." He picked up his pen again. Now. Your school, you do attend school. Yes. St. Gregory's Primary. And before the Dursleys left, were you aware they were leaving? No. They just went. I heard them arguing and packing, and then the car left, and then Harry stopped. I kept thinking someone would come, he said. The school has my address. I thought someone would come. No one had come. The kitchen was very quiet for a moment. Then Fester said, the Beatles genuinely are remarkable. Absolutely world-class. This garden is a treasure, and it was exactly the right thing to say because it moved the air without requiring Harry to stay in that sentence, and Harry looked at him and something in his expression cracked, briefly, into something that was almost a smile. Not quite. But almost. Gomez looked at his legal pad. He looked at the names written there. He looked at the address, at the date, at the series of facts that added up to something that made the back of his throat taste like iron. Then he flipped to a fresh page and wrote, at the top, in large clear letters, Albus Dumbledore. Because here was what Gomez Addams also knew, having done a great deal of reading on the British magical community in the years since his own occasional dealings with it, Harry Potter was not supposed to be here by accident. Harry Potter had been placed here. There had been a decision made, and someone had made it, and that someone had a name, and Gomez Addams had very firm opinions about adults who made decisions about children's living arrangements and considered the matter resolved. He underlined the name twice. Then he refilled his brandy and went to find out where Lurch had put the International Wizarding Legal Directory. The afternoon passed in the way that first days in new houses pass, in boxes and dust and the particular exhaustion of unpacking, which the Addams family engaged in with their characteristic approach of prioritizing the interesting over the practical, so that the suits of armor were fully installed in the upstairs hallway before anyone had located the kettle. Harry, after some initial hovering in doorways with the expression of someone waiting to be told where to stand, had been recruited by Pugsley into carrying boxes, which became a tour of Pugsley's most interesting possessions, which became an extended conversation about the relative merits of different types of explosive compounds conducted in a back bedroom that was quickly becoming extraordinarily dangerous to stand in, and if Harry's voice had lost some of its careful flatness by the end of it, no one made a point of noticing. Wednesday had gone to the garden and returned with something in a jar and a thoughtful expression. Morticia had transformed the master bedroom and the sitting room into versions of themselves that bore no resemblance to what the Dursleys had left behind, partly through the replacement of furniture and partly through something less tangible, the quality of the attention she brought to a space, which changed it the way music changes a room even after the music has stopped. By 6 o'clock, the house smelled of Morticia's cooking, which was a unique smell, herby and dark and complex, not unpleasant, though the herbs in question were not the herbs most people kept in their kitchen, and Harry was sitting at the table doing his homework from the school he hadn't been to in 3 weeks because the Dursleys had left and Gomez was on the telephone. The telephone conversations were educational. The first was with someone at Surrey Social Services, and lasted 40 minutes, and Gomez's voice throughout it was the voice of a man who knows more law than the person he is talking to and is demonstrating this with surgical patience. Several things were established. Several other things were promised. Gomez wrote down names, and times, and reference numbers, with the meticulous attention of a man assembling ammunition. The second was with someone at the Ministry of Magic, London, which required a different number and a different approach and a significantly shorter conversation because Gomez did not reach anyone who was useful, only someone who was defensive, and he wrote down that name too and thanked them pleasantly and hung up. The third was with a man named Caractacus Burke, whom Gomez appeared to know from some previous occasion, and this conversation was quieter and involved several long pauses while Gomez listened, and when it was over he sat for a moment with the phone in his hand and looked at the wall and then he wrote a third name on the fresh legal pad page, under Dumbledore's, and this name he circled rather than underlined. He found Harry in the kitchen, still at the homework. "Harry," he said, and sat down across from him. "I want to tell you something." Harry put down his pencil. "There are people," Gomez said carefully, "who have known where you were, in this house, for a long time. Not the people next door, I mean people in a world that I think you may not know a great deal about yet. Do you understand what I mean by that? Harry was looking at him with those careful, precise eyes. I don't know, he said. Gomez looked at the scar on Harry's forehead. He thought about what he knew, and what he suspected, and what he intended to find out. He thought about a cupboard under a staircase and a boy counting days on a wall. You have a birthday coming up, he said instead. When is it? July 31st, Harry said. 3 weeks, Gomez said. He smiled, and it was a genuine, uncomplicated smile, and it was directed entirely at Harry. We'll have a party. Harry stared at him. A party, he said, as if he were translating from a language he didn't quite speak. A magnificent party, Gomez said. With proper cake. Do you have a preference for cake? Harry opened his mouth. Closed it. Tried again. No one's ever asked me that before, he said. Then you are overdue, Gomez said, on approximately 10 years of someone asking you that. We'll start now. What do you like? Harry thought about it. He thought about it with serious, genuine attention, the way he'd thought about everything since that cupboard door opened, as if each ordinary question was a small gift and he was trying to be worthy of it. I like chocolate, he said. Chocolate, Gomez said. Excellent. I'll tell Morticia. She makes a chocolate cake with a ganache that I think might technically qualify as a controlled substance. The almost smile came back. This time it made it. It was small, quick, uncertain of its own right to exist, and it vanished almost immediately, but it had been there. Gomez saw it and did not remark on it, because he understood, the way people who have paid close attention to the world understand, that remarking on a small victory is the quickest way to make someone afraid of the next one. He just picked up his legal pad and went back to his research, and Harry picked up his pencil and went back to his homework, and in the kitchen of number 4, Privet Drive, which smelled of strange herbs and old cigar smoke and the faint mineral sharpness of the beetle's fester was still cataloguing in jars on the windowsill, something began. It was not dramatic, the beginning. Most real things aren't. It was just a boy at a kitchen table doing his homework and a man at the same table writing down the names of people who had a great deal to answer for, and outside, the very ordinary street of Privet Drive, sitting in the last of the July evening light, absolutely unchanged and entirely unaware that the house at number 4 had just become, for the first time, the kind of house where the person who lived in the cupboard under the stairs was going to be asked what kind of cake he wanted for his birthday. 3 weeks later, Gomez Addams received a letter delivered by a post owl so confident and so large that it landed on the kitchen windowsill, gazed through the glass at the assembled breakfast table with the authority of an owl who has never in its life been kept waiting, and tapped once. Fester opened the window. The owl stepped inside and looked around the kitchen with the expression of an owl that has encountered a great many strange households and has made its peace with all of them. It spotted Harry at the table, walked across the counter with great dignity, and deposited a thick envelope in front of him. Harry looked at it. The envelope was heavy, cream-colored parchment, sealed with red wax that bore an elaborate coat of arms. It was addressed in green ink, and the address read, Mr. H. Potter, the kitchen table number 4, Privet Drive, Little Whinging, Surrey. Harry turned the envelope over. Then over again. Gomez, looking up from his morning newspaper, saw the look on Harry's face and set the newspaper down completely. What is it? Harry said. His voice had gone very quiet. Open it, said Wednesday, from across the table, and there was something in her tone that suggested she had already guessed what it was. Harry broke the seal. He unfolded the letter, 2 sheets of parchment covered in the same green ink, and read it, and his face did a series of things in rapid succession that he didn't control, all of them versions of the same core expression, which was the expression of someone who has just been handed information that rearranges their entire understanding of their own life. He put the letter down on the table. He looked at Gomez. It says I'm a wizard, Harry said. Gomez picked up the letter. He read it. He read it again more slowly. He set it down and looked at it for a long moment, and then he picked up his cigar, which had been resting in the ashtray, and took a long draw on it. "Yes," Gomez said. "It does." "Did you know?" Harry asked. Gomez met his eyes. "I suspected something," he said honestly. "I've been looking into your history, Harry. There are things I know and things I am in the process of finding out." He tapped the letter. "This is, however, a development I intended to come to naturally and in its own time. I'm going to a school," Harry said. "A school for magic." He said the word carefully, like someone trying it out. "Hogwarts." "Apparently so," Gomez said. "Is that," Harry stopped. "Is that real?" Wednesday looked at him. "You've been living with us for 3 weeks," she said. "You've seen You've seen what Mother does to plants. You've seen Uncle Fester light up a room in the literal sense. Are you genuinely asking if magic is real?" Harry opened his mouth. Considered this. Closed it. "Fair point," he said. Gomez laughed, his real laugh, the one that came from somewhere deep and genuine and was not calibrated for company, the one that was loud and warm and completely unself-conscious. Harry had heard it before, but it still startled him, the way a sudden bright light startles you even when you know the room well enough to find the switch. He looked at the letter again. Then, and it was the truest thing he'd done yet, the most unguarded, he smiled. Not the small, apologetic, briefly there smile from 3 weeks ago. This was a real one, wide and wondering and slightly overwhelmed and entirely his. Gomez looked at it, and his expression did something quiet and private that he didn't share with the room. Then he flipped his legal pad to the page that said Albus Dumbledore at the top in large letters, and he began to add to it with renewed energy, because the letter from Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry had, among other things, confirmed several things he had been taking on faith, and Gomez Addams was a man who preferred working from confirmed facts. He had a great deal of work to do. He was, if he was being honest, enormously looking forward to it. Chapter 2, The Boy Who Lived with Monsters, and Found Them Wonderful. The first morning Harry woke up in a real bed, he lay completely still for 4 minutes waiting for someone to tell him to get out of it. The room they'd given him was on the 2nd floor, next to Pugsley's, and it had been, as of 3 weeks ago, the Dursleys' guest room, which meant it had contained a single bed with a mint green duvet and a painting of a lighthouse and nothing else of any character whatsoever. It now contained considerably more. Morticia had asked Harry, with genuine interest and no particular expectation about the answer, what he liked, and Harry had said he didn't really know, because he didn't, and Morticia had nodded as if this were a perfectly complete answer and gone away and done something with the room that was, technically, dark curtains, dark walls, a bookshelf that had appeared from somewhere already half full of books, but was also, in a way Harry couldn't articulate and didn't try to, the first space he had ever occupied that felt like it was waiting for him rather than tolerating him. The lighthouse painting was gone. In its place was a framed print of something that appeared to be an anatomical diagram of a creature that didn't exist, annotated in a language Harry couldn't read, and he had found himself staring at it every night before he fell asleep, following the annotations with his eyes, not understanding them but finding the not understanding comfortable rather than frustrating, the way you can enjoy music without knowing how it's written. He stopped waiting to be told to get out of the bed, eventually. He got out of it on his own terms, which was different, and he pulled on the clothes that had appeared in the wardrobe, actual clothes that fit, which was a novelty that had not stopped being a novelty, and went downstairs. The kitchen at 7 in the morning was already occupied. It was always already occupied. The Addams household ran on a schedule that was entirely its own and bore no relationship to conventional morning patterns, which meant that Uncle Fester might be making coffee at midnight and Wednesday might be at the kitchen table at 5:30 with a notebook, writing things down in her small precise handwriting, and Gomez was always up before sunrise because he slept the way he did everything, quickly and completely and without half measures, taking exactly the amount of sleep he needed and then being done with it. This morning it was Morticia at the counter, doing something with herbs and a small bronze pot that was producing a smell Harry had come to associate with mornings here, dark and complex and faintly sweet in the back of the throat, like incense and coffee had reached an agreement. Her plants were arranged along the windowsill and they were, as always, in constant slow motion, leaves turning toward her, tendrils extending slightly when she passed, and Harry had stopped jumping at this approximately 10 days ago and had started finding it normal, which said something interesting about what normal was. "Good morning," Morticia said, without turning around. She always knew when Harry entered the room. He'd asked Wednesday about this and Wednesday had said, flatly, she always knows when anyone enters the room, which was not precisely comforting but was, in its way, reassuring. It wasn't specific to Harry, it was just Morticia being Morticia. "Morning," Harry said. He sat at the table. Thing was already there, going through the mail with the methodical competence of a personal assistant, sorting it into piles by some system Harry hadn't decoded yet. It held up a small card and snapped its fingers inquiringly. "That's for Fester," Morticia said. "Put it with the others." Thing sorted the card. "There's toast," Morticia said. "And there's something on the stove if you want it. It's not poisonous." "You say that," Harry said, and then stopped, because he'd been about to make a joke and he wasn't entirely sure he had permission yet. Morticia turned from the counter and looked at him. "I do say that," she agreed, with the faintest curve at one corner of her mouth. "It's my most reliable endorsement. Sit down, darling." The darling landed on Harry with the lightness of something that wasn't trying to land on him at all, just passing through, and it was so entirely matter-of-fact that he couldn't treat it as significant, which was probably, he was beginning to understand, the point. He sat. Gomez came in from the sitting room with his legal pad, already in his suit, already with the cigar, and sat across from Harry and immediately became absorbed in his notes with the intensity of a man doing something he finds deeply engaging. Harry looked at the notes upside down and could make out Gringotts, vault trust arrangements, guardian status, contested, and then a long list of names he didn't recognize except one, which was Dumbledore, which appeared on several pages and always seemed to have more written under it than the previous time. "Gomez," Harry said. Gomez didn't look up. "What are you writing?" Gomez looked up. He looked at Harry in the way he did when he was deciding how much to say, which was a look Harry had learned to read quickly. It wasn't the calculating look of someone deciding what to hide, it was the deliberate look of someone deciding how to be honest without being overwhelming. There was a difference and Harry knew the difference because he'd spent his life with people who looked at him the first way. "I'm building a case," Gomez said. "Against who?" Gomez set down his pen. "Several parties," he said. "Starting with your aunt and uncle, who are currently guests of the Surrey police system and who will shortly be the subjects of a civil action for neglect and what I intend to argue constitutes unlawful imprisonment." He paused. "And then, separately and more importantly, against the person who decided you should live there in the first place." Harry was quiet for a moment. "Dumbledore," he said. Gomez looked at him steadily. "You've heard the name." "I've heard, I don't know." "I've heard it. The neighbors used to talk sometimes. And there was a letter once, from someone at my school, asking about marks on my arms, and Aunt Petunia said, she mentioned Dumbledore. That he'd arranged things." Harry picked at a thread on his sleeve. "I didn't really understand it." "I'll explain it to you," Gomez said, "when I understand all of it myself. What I know now is this: you were placed in that house deliberately, by people with the power and knowledge to do otherwise, and the reasoning given was that it was for your protection. I have," he looked at the legal pad, "significant questions about whether protection was actually the primary consideration." Harry thought about the cupboard. He thought about the marks on the wall, the ones he'd made to keep track of time during the long locked stretches. He thought about usually left bread. "What kind of questions?" he asked. "The kind that have answers," Gomez said, which was the most Gomez thing he could have said, and he smiled and picked up his pen, and Harry felt something settle in him slightly, the way a badly hung door settles when someone finally puts the hinge in correctly. Wednesday came in at 7:30 and sat across from Harry and opened a book without saying anything to anyone, which was her standard morning mode and one that Harry had initially found hostile and now found restful. Wednesday's silence was never empty, it had weight and texture and it was somehow companionable, the way certain people can sit in the same room and the room feels more occupied rather than less. After about 5 minutes she said, without looking up from the book, "Have you thought about what house you want to be sorted into?" "I don't know what the houses are," Harry said. Wednesday turned a page. "Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, Slytherin," she said. "Each with distinct cultural values and reputations. Gryffindor emphasizes bravery and recklessness, which are generally not distinguished from one another in their literature. Hufflepuff values loyalty and hard work. Ravenclaw values intelligence and wit. Slytherin values ambition and cunning and has the highest rate of producing dark wizards, which is, statistically, more interesting than the others." Harry looked at her. "Are you going to Hogwarts?" "Not this year," Wednesday said. "I have other commitments." "What commitments?" Wednesday turned another page. "Things that need finishing before I can commit to a 7-year program," she said, which told Harry nothing and somehow also told him everything. "I could look into Hogwarts admission for you," Gomez said to her, over his legal pad, with the hopeful tone of a man making an offer he knows will be declined. "I know you could," Wednesday said pleasantly. "The thought's appreciated," Gomez said, and went back to his notes. Harry looked between them and felt the specific warmth of overhearing a family in-joke without being excluded from it, which was entirely new and slightly vertiginous. "I'd be scared," Harry said, "of the sorting. Not knowing which house." Wednesday finally looked up from her book. "Why?" she said, and it was a genuine question, not a challenge. Harry shrugged. "What if it puts me somewhere wrong?" "Then it would be wrong," Wednesday said. "The hat sorts based on traits and potential, according to the histories. But traits aren't destiny and potential isn't character. Where you're sorted changes your environment, not your nature." Harry considered this. "That," he said slowly, "is actually helpful." "I occasionally am," Wednesday said, and went back to her book, and Harry drank his tea and watched the window and thought about houses and sorting and the strange fact that thinking about a magical school felt, for the first time, like something to look forward to rather than something to decode. The birthday was July 31st and Gomez treated the preparation for it with the same energy he brought to litigation. This meant that it was thorough, considered, slightly terrifying in scope, and ultimately exactly right in a way that nothing planned with less conviction could have been. Harry came downstairs that morning to find the kitchen had been transformed overnight, black and dark red streamers, candles everywhere, a banner that Pugsley had painted himself which read "Happy Birthday Harry" in letters that were enthusiastic if not entirely consistent, and at the center of the table, on a stand that had not existed yesterday, a chocolate cake of dimensions that made Harry stop in the doorway. "Good morning," Gomez said from his chair, and then, "Happy birthday," and the words were so simply said and so completely meant that Harry's throat did something that he did not anticipate. "Happy birthday," Pugsley said. "Happy birthday," Morticia said. Fester, from the corner where he was already eating a piece of toast, raised his mug in Harry's direction with great solemnity. Lurch emerged from the hallway, looked at Harry, and said, "Erg," which Harry had come to understand meant something in the positive range. Wednesday had placed a flat wrapped parcel at Harry's seat. She said, "Happy birthday," in her regular voice, which was Wednesday's regular voice and therefore contained no particular warmth but also no distance, it was just her voice, saying the thing, and that was what it was. Harry sat down. He looked at the parcel. He looked at all of them. "You don't have to," he said, and immediately hated that he'd said it, because it was the kind of thing you said when you've been trained to apologize for existing. "We are aware we don't have to," Gomez said pleasantly. "We want to. There's an important difference and I encourage you to commit it to memory." Harry picked up the parcel. Wednesday's gift was a book, a thin, clearly old, clearly not from any shop book with a cover that said "A Beginner's Phenomenology of Magical Taxonomy" in small faded letters. He opened it and a folded piece of Wednesday's notepaper fell out, and on it she had written, in her small precise script, this was the first magical text I found worth reading. The annotations in the margins are mine. You can add your own. Harry read this twice. He looked at Wednesday. It's not a new copy, she said, which was not an apology, just a clarification. I know, Harry said. That's why it's, thank you, Wednesday. Wednesday looked at her plate. You're welcome, she said, which coming from Wednesday meant something closer to you are formally recognized, and I do not give formal recognition lightly, and Harry was beginning to understand this. Pugsley's gift was an object that appeared to be a compass but was not, and came with a handwritten note explaining what it actually was, which made Harry simultaneously fascinated and slightly concerned for his own safety, and was therefore a perfect Pugsley gift. Fester gave him a jar of beetles, labeled in Fester's handwriting, each one identified by name. The names were not scientific names. They were names like Gerald Jr., Countess Biscuit, and the Magnificent Derek. Gerald Jr. is the best one, Fester said, pointing. Very bold. Excellent character. I think you'll get along. Harry looked at the Magnificent Derek, who was doing something impressive with his antennae. He's brilliant, Harry said, which was entirely genuine, because the Addams household had in 3 weeks successfully recalibrated Harry's sense of brilliant. Then Gomez placed a small envelope in front of Harry and said, "This one's different. This one's not a gift exactly. It's information that belongs to you." Harry opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, Gomez's neat legal typeface, summarizing, in clear and direct language, the facts of Harry's vault at Gringotts. The number of the vault. The amount in it, which was considerable. The fact that it had been in trust since his parents' death, accessible to him on the terms set by his parents' will, which terms had been, as Gomez wrote in a note at the bottom of the page, subject to significant extrajudicial interference which I am currently investigating and which I intend to address. Harry read it twice. He read the number at the top, the vault number, and the figure below it, and looked at Gomez. That's mine, he said. Your parents left it for you, Gomez said. Yes. Harry looked at the figure again. He was not overwhelmed by it, he had no framework yet for what wizarding money meant in practical terms, but the fact of it, the weight of it, the knowledge that his parents had left him something and that he had a vault with his name on it in a building somewhere, struck him in the way that concrete evidence strikes someone who has been told all their life that they are nothing and no one. He folded the paper carefully and put it in his pocket. Okay, he said. Thank you. Diagon Alley next week, Gomez said. We'll go together and sort out your school things and I'll introduce you to the vault in person. I think that's better than paper. All of us? Pugsley asked. All of us, Gomez confirmed, and Pugsley made a sound of satisfaction and reached for more cake, and Fester began telling the Magnificent Derek about the plan in a low confiding voice, and Morticia cut Harry the first slice, and the candles, lit, somehow, with no one visibly lighting them, bent their flames toward him in a way that could have been unsettling and was, instead, somehow welcoming, the way fire welcomes a cold thing. Later that afternoon, while Pugsley was in the back garden doing something with a tube of material that was almost certainly not supposed to be combined that way, and Fester was cataloguing garden beetles, and Gomez was on the telephone again, Harry found Wednesday in the sitting room. She was sitting on the floor, cross-legged, with her back against the armchair and the annotated magical taxonomy book open on her knees, one of her own books, not the copy she'd given Harry, which he had already carried upstairs and was treating with the careful reverence of someone who understood they'd been given access to something private. Harry sat on the floor next to her. Not close enough to crowd her. Just, near. She didn't object. After a while, he said, Wednesday. Can I ask you something? She turned a page. You can always ask. When I was in the cupboard, Harry said, slowly, picking his way through it. And you found me. Why did you, I mean, the way you looked at me. You weren't scared and you weren't, he stopped. Most people look at me like a problem. Wednesday considered this. She turned another page. You weren't a problem, she said. You were a situation that had been caused by a problem. Those are different things. What was the problem? People who should have known better, Wednesday said. And someone above them who made a choice and called it care. She looked at him sideways, briefly. My father is going to take that apart. I know, Harry said. Are you frightened of that? Of what might come out? Harry thought about it honestly. No, he said. I don't think so. It's my life. I don't think being scared of the truth of my own life makes much sense. Wednesday looked at him for a slightly longer moment. That, she said, is actually a remarkably mature position. You sound surprised. I'm not surprised, Wednesday said. I'm noting it. She went back to her book. You're going to be fine at Hogwarts, she said, in the tone of someone delivering a verdict. Harry looked at the floor. You think? You're better at assessing situations than most people your age, Wednesday said. You've had to be. That's useful. The trick will be not apologizing for it. The night before they were due to go to Diagon Alley, Harry lay in his dark room and looked at the anatomical diagram of the creature that didn't exist and felt something he had to examine carefully before he named it, because it was unfamiliar enough that he needed to approach it slowly. It was, he determined after some consideration, anticipation. Not the tight-coiled anticipation of waiting for something bad, but the open, slightly breathless anticipation of something good. The school supply list was on his bedside table, printed in that distinctive green ink, and he'd read it several times: 1 standard size 2 dragonhide protective gloves, 1 set glass or crystal files, 1 telescope. He had a vault. He had money his parents had left him. He was going to walk into a street full of magic and buy a wand. He had a wand. Somewhere, already made, already his, there was a wand. He fell asleep thinking about it. The morning came fast and clear, and Gomez was already dressed and magnificent at the breakfast table, and Morticia was in something even more floor-length than usual, and Pugsley was vibrating with the specific energy of a child who has been promised an interesting outing, and Harry came downstairs and found all of them already assembled and Lurch at the front door with his keys and the car running. Ready? Gomez said, and the word was addressed entirely to Harry. Harry had his list. He had the paper with the vault number in his pocket, folded into the same crease it had been in since his birthday. He had the annotated taxonomy book under his arm because he'd been reading it and hadn't finished and didn't want to put it down. Ready, Harry said. The car was the car. It was black and long and made sounds that Harry's understanding of internal combustion engines could not entirely account for, and it smelled of old leather and good tobacco and the faint dry mineral smell that Harry associated with the suits of armor in the upstairs hallway. Fester got in the front. Pugsley and Harry got in the back. Wednesday, who had decided to come on the grounds that the trip would be interesting, sat behind Gomez and looked out the window with her standard expression of complete attention. Morticia, next to Gomez in the front passenger seat, opened the window exactly 1 inch and let her fingers trail in the air. One of her plants, a small dark thing in a pot she'd brought with her, balanced on the dashboard, extended a tendril toward the gap, and she touched it lightly with one finger and it subsided. How do we get there? Harry asked. It's hidden, isn't it? The letter said it was in London, but it's not like a normal street. The Leaky Cauldron, Gomez said, from the front. A pub on Charing Cross Road. The entrance to Diagon Alley is through the back. Standard misdirection architecture, I've seen similar in several other magical communities around the world. The Venetian magical district uses a canal lock that goes somewhere other than expected. You've been to Diagon Alley before? Harry asked, surprised. Once, Gomez said. Business. Many years ago. Before your time. He checked his mirror. I have good memories of the wand shop. Ollivanders, Wednesday said, from behind him, with the tone of someone who had read everything. That's the one, Gomez said. Do you have a wand? Harry asked him. Gomez smiled. It was the particular smile of someone who has been asked a question that they find pleasingly complicated. "I have several interesting things," he said. "A wand is one of them." Harry decided not to follow that thread right now. He leaned his head back on the seat and watched the suburban streets of Surrey give way to the motorway give way to the city, and he read 3 more pages of Wednesday's annotated taxonomy, and he thought about a wand somewhere that was his, and the car carried them all forward through the brightening morning toward a street full of magic, and Harry Potter, who had spent the first 10 years of his life in a cupboard being taught to be small, sat in the back of the most interesting car in England and was, incrementally, becoming something else. The leaky cauldron was everything the letter hadn't described, which was to say it was dark and slightly smoky and full of people who were none of them quite ordinary, and when the Addams family walked through the door, the landlord, Tom, ancient and toothless and possessed of the equanimity of someone who had worked this particular establishment for decades, looked up from his bar and said nothing for a moment. "Good morning," Gomez said, to the room at large. Several patrons looked up. A witch in an elaborate purple hat stared at Morticia with the expression of someone seeing a painting come to life, though whether that was admiration or alarm was unclear. A wizard in robes that had seen better decades shuffled on his stool and knocked over his drink. 2 people at a corner table went very still. "Good morning," Tom said finally. "Haven't seen you before." "New to the country," Gomez said, which was not quite true, but was the kind of answer that closed conversations rather than opening them, and Gomez Addams was perfectly capable of identifying when a conversation needed closing. "We're here to see to school shopping. Can you direct us to the back?" Tom directed them to the back. The back of the leaky cauldron opened, via a specific sequence of brick tapping that Gomez executed from memory with perfect accuracy and with the casual confidence of a man unlocking his own front door, onto Diagon Alley. Harry stepped through. The noise hit him first. Not loud noise, not the roar of a crowd, but the layered, busy noise of a lot of people doing a lot of things simultaneously, voices and footsteps and the occasional crack of something in somewhere distant, a sound like bells. Then the color, robes in every shade, shop fronts in gold and dark wood, broomsticks in a window, owls in cages, a cart going past with something covered in a cloth that moved. Then the smell, parchment and candle wax and something herby and something metallic, and underneath it all the particular smell of very old stone that has absorbed a great deal of interesting history. Harry stood on the cobblestones and turned in a slow half-circle, and something happened to his face that was not something he was doing on purpose, it was just happening, the wide-eyed uncurated wonder of a child seeing something enormous and real for the first time, the expression that gets trained out of people by the time they're adults unless they're lucky or unless they've been kept from things long enough that they still know how to want them. Gomez stood next to him and looked at the same street. "Well," Gomez said. He put a hand briefly on Harry's shoulder, "light, there and gone. Let's see to the important things first." They went to Gringotts. The bank was everything that deserved to be written about it and that Harry would write about later in the margins of Wednesday's book, towering, white, staffed by creatures who regarded the entire human species with professional contempt, possessed of a gravity and age that made Harry feel very small but in a way that felt appropriate rather than crushing. The goblin at the front counter looked at Gomez with the specific reptilian assessment of a creature that has evaluated a great many impressive people and found the experience instructive. "Addams," Gomez said, presenting a card. "And this is Harry Potter, who would like to visit his vault." The goblin looked at Harry. Its gaze went to his forehead. Its expression did not change, but something behind its eyes did, a flicker of something that was not surprise, because goblins do not surprise easily, but was close to recognition. "Vault 687, the goblin said. "That's the one," Gomez said. The cart ride was magnificent and slightly violent, and Pugsley made sounds of pure joy through all of it, and Fester gripped the side with one hand and waved the other in the air, and Harry, white-knuckled on the seat, found that he was laughing, which came out of him as something close to surprise, the laugh of someone who didn't know they were going to laugh until they already were. The vault door opened. Harry stood at the entrance and looked at his parents' gold, the neat stacked piles of galleons, the sickles, the nuts, and felt the same thing he'd felt reading the paper on his birthday, magnified. This was real. This was physical. This was something they had left for him, something that had been here waiting for him, regardless of what anyone had told him about himself in the years since. He stepped inside. He picked up a galleon and held it. Behind him, Gomez was silent, and Harry understood that the silence was deliberate, that this was being given to him as a private moment even in a crowd, which was a specific and sophisticated kind of generosity. "Okay," Harry said, after a while. He had loaded his money bag. He had touched the wall of the vault with one hand, just once, just briefly, which he couldn't have explained and didn't try to. "Okay. Let's go." The rest of the day was its own kind of magic, separate from the spells and wands variety. Madame Malkin's robes shop was notable primarily for the moment when Morticia looked at the standard black school robes and said, "These are perfectly acceptable," which was, Harry had learned, a very positive review from Morticia. The witch fitting Harry's robes was doing tolerably well until Morticia appeared at her elbow and suggested a small adjustment to the cut that resulted in Harry's robes fitting in a way that the standard ones distinctly did not, and the witch flushed slightly and said, "Of course, madam," with the tone of someone recognizing superior knowledge and choosing cooperation over pride. Flourish and blots was where Gomez became briefly unmanageable. He was supposed to be purchasing Harry's school books, and he did purchase Harry's school books, efficiently and completely, and then he found the legal text section and had to be retrieved 20 minutes later from behind a stack of volumes that included International Magical Law, A Practitioner's Guide, Wizarding Tort and Contract, 4th edition, and something called The Limits of Ministerial Authority in Matters of Guardian Designation that he had apparently been looking for some time. "This is exactly what I needed," Gomez said, holding it up. "Wonderful," Morticia said. "Come along." "Just one more, Gomez." "Coming, cara mia." He bought 7 books, none of which were on the Hogwarts list. The Owl Emporium was where something happened that none of them had anticipated. They were there for Hedwig, Harry's owl, already chosen from the listing in a catalogue, a beautiful snowy owl that the shop had in stock and that Harry had been quietly excited about for the entire week since reading the letter. He collected her, paid for her, and was holding her cage and looking at her with the expression of someone who has just acquired their first piece of something that is entirely and uncategorically theirs, and Hedwig looked back at him with the yellow-eyed intelligence of an owl who has assessed the situation and found it acceptable. A woman came in behind them. She was ordinary looking, which in Diagon Alley was mildly notable, and she was pushing past people with the purposeful movement of someone trying not to be noticed while being noticed. She looked at Harry. She looked at his forehead. She looked at Gomez. Her eyes went wide. She left very quickly. Gomez watched her go. "Interesting," he said, quietly, and wrote something in his coat pocket notebook. Then there was Ollivander's. The shop was narrow and dark and smelled of sawdust and something indefinable, and the man who ran it was ancient in a way that went beyond years, the kind of ancient that suggested the person had been present at events that most people only read about. He appeared from the darkness between shelves when Harry walked in and looked at him with pale eyes that were unsettling in their depth. "Harry Potter," Ollivander said softly. "I wondered when I'd be seeing you." Harry met his gaze steadily. Something in the man's tone was, not threatening exactly, but proprietary, the tone of someone who considers they have a claim on a piece of information. Harry had spent 10 years learning to read that tone. "Hello," Harry said. Ollivander looked past Harry to Gomez, who was standing slightly behind and to one side in the relaxed posture that Gomez wore when he was paying absolute attention without appearing to. The wand-maker's expression shifted slightly, an adjustment, a reassessment. "I know the Addams name," Ollivander said. "Most people in this profession do," Gomez said pleasantly. Something passed between them that Harry didn't have the context for and filed for later. Then Ollivander turned his full attention to Harry and the process began. Wand after wand, measurements and waves and small attempts that produced minor disasters and polite resets, and through it all Ollivander's running quiet commentary on the woods and cores and histories, and Harry, who had expected to feel like a test subject, found instead that he was fascinated, genuinely, completely fascinated, by the idea that every wand had a distinct nature, That matching was not assignment but relationship, that the wand chose. The final wand was holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches, and when Harry took it and the warmth ran through his hand and the gold sparks burst from the tip and he looked at the result, at the feather sparks settling on the dusty floor, he felt the same thing he'd felt in the vault at Gringotts. This is mine, this was always going to be mine, this was waiting. Curious, Ollivander said softly. Curious indeed. What's curious? Harry asked. The phoenix whose tail feather is in your wand, Ollivander said, gave one other feather. Just one other. He met Harry's eyes. The wand that gave you that scar. The shop was quiet. Harry looked at the wand in his hand. He thought about what that meant and what it didn't mean and what he was going to do with this information that had just been handed to him. Interesting, he said. Which was, Gomez thought, watching his son's face, and he had been thinking of Harry that way for approximately 11 days and was not going to complicate that by examining it, exactly the right response. Not fear. Not drama. Just interesting. The response of someone who collects information and decides later what to do with it. He was going to be absolutely fine. That evening, back in the kitchen of number 4, which was almost unrecognizable now from what it had been, which was, Gomez thought, the correct direction of travel, Harry sat at the table with his new wand in front of him and his school books stacked next to him and Hedwig on a perch in the corner that Lurch had built from scratch in approximately 40 minutes, and he looked at all of it. Pugsley was next to him, going through the school books with the enthusiasm of someone who finds explosions in unexpected places, and had already annotated the magical drafts and potions text with what he considered promising leads. Fester was telling Hedwig about beetles. Hedwig was listening with the patient attention of an owl that has decided this household is unusual but bearable. Morticia was reading, and her plants were doing their slow reaching. Lurch was somewhere making something. There was a sound from the back of the house, rhythmic and purposeful. And Gomez was at the table with his new book stacked beside the legal pads, and he looked up from the limits of ministerial authority in matters of guardian designation and looked at Harry, and Harry was looking at the wand, and his face was the face of someone in the process of understanding something, not all of it, not the whole thing, but a piece of it, a real and solid piece. The piece that said, "This is real. I am real. This is mine." Gomez looked at the legal pads. At Dumbledore's name. At the pages of notes and precedents and the increasingly detailed picture he was assembling of a decision that had been made about a child's life by someone who had not adequately considered that decisions about children's lives have consequences that outlast the reasoning behind them. He had a court date in mind. He had, in fact, several. He was, if he was being scrupulously honest with himself, having an absolutely wonderful time. He went back to his book, and the kitchen was warm, and the evening came in through the windows, and Harry Potter sat in the middle of all of it and slowly began to believe that he was supposed to be there. Chapter 3, Diagon Alley with the Addams family. The second visit to Diagon Alley was not supposed to happen. The first visit had covered everything on the Hogwarts list: robes, books, cauldron, telescope, files, scales, dragonhide gloves, and the wand that Harry had been sleeping with on his bedside table at a careful distance, not touching it exactly but aware of it the way you're aware of something warm in a cold room. Everything was sorted. There was no practical reason to return. But Gomez had received a letter. It came on a Wednesday, the day, not the person, though Wednesday the person received her own correspondence that morning and read it at the breakfast table with an expression that suggested it was satisfactory, and it was written on Ministry of Magic letterhead in the formal copperplate of official correspondence, and it said, in the careful language of people who are not quite threatening you but want you to understand they could, "Dear Mr. Addams, it has come to the attention of the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, in conjunction with the Office of Magical Education, that Mr. Harry J. Potter, currently believed to be residing at the above address, has recently undergone first-year magical assessment and been registered for attendance at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry commencing September 1st of this year. The Ministry wishes to confirm that all appropriate guardianship arrangements are in place for the above-named minor, and requests that Mr. Potter's designated guardian contact this office at the earliest convenience to confirm the existing arrangements established under the terms of the Hogwarts Guardian Protocol of 1943. Yours sincerely, Cornelius Fudge, Minister for Magic. Gomez read it once, quickly. Then he read it again, slowly, the way he read things he intended to use. Then he set it beside his breakfast plate and picked up his coffee and looked at the middle distance with the expression of a man who has just been handed not a problem but a tool. "Who's Cornelius Fudge?" Harry asked, reading upside down. "The Minister for Magic," Gomez said. "A man who has, it appears, noticed us. Is that bad?" "On the contrary," Gomez said. He looked at the letter with something approaching affection. "He's confirmed in writing that guardianship arrangements require his office's acknowledgement. Which means his office has, or is claiming to have, records of the original arrangements." He picked up his pen. "Which means there is a paper trail." He smiled. It was the smile of a man who has just spotted the thread that unravels the sweater. "We're going back to Diagon Alley," he said. "I need the Wizarding Legal District. There are filings to make." Wednesday looked up from her letter. "I'll come," she said. "As will I," Morticia said. "Brilliant," said Pugsley, who would have said this regardless of the destination. Harry looked at his half-eaten toast. "Are they going to try to, is this ministry going to cause trouble? For you having me here?" Gomez looked at him steadily. "Harry. Have you observed, in your time with this family, any instance of trouble causing us difficulty?" Harry thought about this genuinely. "No," he said. "Then you have your answer," Gomez said. The car left Privet Drive at 9:30. It was the kind of August morning that London does when it's trying, blue sky with actual conviction, the city looking almost charming, and Diagon Alley, when they arrived through the back of the Leaky Cauldron, was full with the late summer rush of families doing their own Hogwarts shopping. Third years comparing new robes. A cluster of first years who looked simultaneously excited and terrified. Parents moving between shops with lists in their hands and the busy distracted energy of people managing logistics. The Addams family walked into the middle of all of it. The effect was immediate and was the same effect they always had, not panic, not hostility, but a particular quality of attention, the way a room recalibrates when something enters it that doesn't fit the expected categories. Morticia moved through the crowd the way she always moved, and people stepped aside, not because she demanded it but because she occupied space in a way that made you want to give her room. Gomez walked with the cigar and the perfect suit and the radiating confidence of a man who has never once considered whether he belongs somewhere and therefore always does. Wednesday walked behind them and observed everything. Harry walked next to Gomez and was observed by everyone, which was a different and more pointed thing. He'd noticed it on the first trip, the looks, the glances at his forehead, the whispered conversations that began when he passed, and had not said anything about it to Gomez because he was still in the process of learning that he was allowed to say things about things that bothered him. He noticed it again now, more of it, the additional weight of attention that was specifically about him. A woman stopped dead when she saw him and gasped, "Oh, it's him, it's Harry Potter," with a reverence that Harry found profoundly uncomfortable. "Hello," Harry said, because Morticia had taught him that responding directly to things was better than avoiding them. The woman blinked, apparently not having expected to be addressed. Your parents," she managed. "What they did." She stopped. Her eyes went to Gomez. Something shifted in her expression, curiosity, or the beginning of question. Are you with these people?" "Yes," Harry said simply. "The Addams family," Gomez said to the woman, and offered his hand, and the woman shook it with the expression of someone not entirely sure what they'd agreed to. "Gomez Addams. Harry is with us. Are you well?" The woman said she was. She moved on. Several people around them had been listening and the ripple of reaction, "Who is that man? Why is Harry Potter with him? Where are the Dursleys?" spread outward through the crowd with the speed of gossip in an enclosed community. "They're going to talk about this," Harry said, quietly, to Gomez. Let them, Gomez said. In my experience, being talked about is significantly better than being ignored. At least one of those two conditions will result in someone looking into things. Wednesday, from behind them, said, there's someone following us. Gomez didn't turn around. How far back? 20 feet. Witch in green robes. She's been with us since the entrance. She was in the leaky cauldron the first time, Harry said, suddenly remembering. She looked at me and left quickly. Gomez walked another 10 feet, then stopped in front of a shop window and turned as if examining the display, a perfectly natural movement, and clocked the witch in green robes, who had stopped too quickly and was now engaged in the unconvincing pantomime of someone who had not just been following a group of people. She had a notebook. Reporter, Gomez said, and sounded genuinely pleased. Daily Prophet? Wednesday asked. Almost certainly. He turned away from the window. Let her look. We have nothing to hide and several things we'd like the magical community to begin thinking about. Are you going to talk to her? Harry asked. Not today, Gomez said. Today, Harry, we're going to do something slightly more interesting than talk to a reporter. We're going to file a formal challenge to the Ministry's guardianship records. He produced the fudge letter from his breast pocket, smooth and crisp and now annotated in 3 colors of ink. I've identified the relevant office. It's in Knockturn Alley, through the administrative back passage. There's a wizarding legal registry that most people don't know exists and that I found referenced in the practitioner's guide I bought last week. Most people don't go to Knockturn Alley voluntarily, said a passing wizard in yellow robes, who had apparently been listening. I'm not most people, Gomez said pleasantly. Knockturn Alley was darker and narrower than Diagon Alley and considerably less concerned with presenting itself well. The shops along it sold things that didn't particularly benefit from scrutiny and the people moving through it did so with the quick purposeful movement of people who have specific destinations and prefer not to be slowed by questions. The Addams family walked down it with the collective energy of people who have arrived somewhere that finally makes sense, and several of the shop's more shadowy patrons found themselves stepping back against the walls not because they were frightened, or not primarily, but because there was something about Morticia Addams in a narrow dark alley that was like something finally arriving in the correct setting, and the setting knew it. Harry walked and looked at everything with honest interest, his wand in his pocket and his eyes taking inventory. A shop with hand and finger bones in the window. A place selling items with no explanatory labels whatsoever. A figure in a deep hood negotiating quietly with a man behind a counter. This is the best part of the magical world so far, Pugsley said, with genuine admiration. It's a commercial district, Wednesday said. The items are interesting. The people are less so. The people here are trying, Fester said thoughtfully, examining a window display. You have to give them credit. That's a real effort. The Wizarding Legal Registry was halfway down the alley behind a door with a brass plate that had gone green with age and said, in small letters, M. Noctua and Partners, Magical Legal Registry and Filings. EST 1703. Inside was a clerk who looked as though he had been installed at his desk sometime around the establishment date and had not moved significantly since. He looked up at Gomez with the expression of a man who was very sure of the capabilities of his own bureaucracy. Help you, he said. Gomez Addams, Gomez said. I'm here to file a formal challenge to existing guardianship records under Section 14 of the Magical Minors Protection Act, 1954, and to simultaneously register a notice of intent to contest the terms of the original guardian placement under the provisions of the Potter family will, which I believe your office holds in trust. The clerk looked at him for a long moment. That's a very specific set of filings, he said. Yes, Gomez agreed. Do you have the forms? The clerk had the forms. He produced them with the slightly dazed expression of someone who has been behind a counter for decades and has, for the first time, encountered a person who knows exactly what they want and exactly why. He set them on the counter. Gomez filled them out with the speed of someone who had already written the answers in his mind, which he had, because Gomez Addams did not arrive at a desk unprepared. Wednesday stood at his shoulder and read each form as he completed it, and once, quietly, said, Section 7, the provision about blood-based placement. You're contesting the Fidelius adjacent reasoning. Yes, Gomez said, without looking up. Good, Wednesday said. Harry, standing slightly behind them, was reading the notice board on the wall, which had a number of official-looking documents pinned to it, and his eye caught on one, a standard form document titled Wizarding Guardianship, Powers and Limitations of Designated Overseers. He read it quietly and found, in the third paragraph under Designated Overseers, a sentence that made something clarify in his head. A designated overseer holds authority over a minor's living arrangements, educational choices, and financial access until the minor reaches majority, subject to the minor's own magical lineage rights, which supersede overseer authority in matters of. He stopped. He looked at Gomez. Gomez, he said, who was my designated overseer? Gomez looked up. He looked at the document Harry was reading. Something in his expression settled into a very particular kind of calm. Dumbledore, he said. Technically. Although the actual filing was done by the office of the Chief Warlock under emergency powers and countersigned by the minister at the time, which was a man named Millicent Bagnold. So it wasn't just Dumbledore, Harry said. There were other people who signed off. Yes, Gomez said. There were. He looked at Harry with something that was equal parts pride and something warmer. You're reading this correctly, he said. Multiple parties with multiple accountabilities. It's a much better case than a single decision-maker. Harry looked back at the document. He had the expression of someone learning a new language and finding that they're better at it than expected. Can I get a copy of this? The clerk, who had been watching this exchange with the expression of a man watching a chess game he hadn't expected to be interesting, said, I can provide copies of all public registry documents. It's 3 nuts a page. We'll take everything relevant, Gomez said, and smiled at the clerk, and the clerk, against what appeared to be his professional better judgment, smiled back. They were in the registry office for 45 minutes. When they came out into Nocturne Alley, Gomez had a folder of filed documents, 3 receipts, 2 certified copies, and the expression of a man who has laid the first stone of something he intends to be very large. He put the folder in his breast pocket. It was a bigger folder than the pocket should have accommodated, and straightened his jacket. Now, he said. Shall we get lunch? There was a place in Diagon Alley proper that served food and that Fester had spotted on the first visit and catalogued for future reference. They went there and took up a large table and ordered, and the witch who served them did a double take at the assembled group with the particular expression of someone who has served a lot of unusual customers and is provisionally ranking this experience. Harry had a meat pie and it was the best thing he'd eaten that wasn't Morticia's cooking, and he ate it and listened to Gomez explain, for his and Pugsley's benefit, what the filings they just made meant in practical terms. The challenge to the guardianship records, Gomez said, formally puts the ministry on notice that the existing arrangements are being contested. This is important because it creates a legal obligation for them to respond. If they respond by defending the original placement, they have to produce evidence that the placement was lawful and in Harry's best interests. If they try to ignore the filing, they can't, Wednesday said, drinking her tea. Section 14 has a mandatory response provision. 14 days. Exactly, Gomez said. And the notice of intent to contest the will terms, that's the more interesting one. Your parents' will, Harry, contains specific provisions about your guardianship. Those provisions were, I believe, overridden by Dumbledore's emergency placement using the overseer powers. But emergency powers have a duration limit. After a certain period, they revert to the standard provisions unless actively renewed. He paused. I don't believe they were renewed. Harry sat with this. So what does that mean? Pugsley asked, helpfully. It means, Gomez said, that after a certain point, possibly as early as your 3rd year with the Dursleys, Dumbledore's authority over your living arrangements may have lapsed entirely. Which means you are being kept there not under any legal provision, but under the assumption that no one would check. The table was quiet. No one checked, Harry said. No one checked, Gomez agreed. Until now. Morticia set down her tea. There is also the question, she said, of what Albus Dumbledore will do when he becomes aware that someone is checking. He'll come here, Harry said. Everyone looked at him. Won't he? Harry said. He knows where I live. He knew the whole time. When he finds out that there's been filings, that someone's questioning him, he'll come here. Yes, Gomez said simply. He probably will. And? Harry said. Gomez looked at him. And we will be here, he said. And we will have considerably more documentation than he expects. Harry thought about this. He thought about the photograph of Dumbledore he'd seen in one of his new school books, an old man with a long silver beard and half-moon spectacles and eyes described, in the text, as having a particular twinkle. He thought about what it meant that an old man with a twinkle in his eyes had signed a document putting Harry in a cupboard. I'm not scared of him, Harry said. I know, Gomez said. I want to be there, Harry said. When he comes. I don't want to be upstairs or out of the room. I want to be there. Something moved through Gomez's expression. He looked at Harry for a moment, and then he said, Of course you do. And you will be. Wednesday, from across the table, said, You should know what to say to him. What do you mean? Harry said. He'll have an explanation, she said. He'll have a reason. It will be well constructed and it will probably be partially true, because people like him are very good at partial truths. You need to know in advance what the partial truth is missing. What is it missing? Harry asked. Wednesday looked at him with her even, serious gaze. Your consent, she said. He'll explain what he did and why, and none of the explanation will account for the fact that you never had any choice in it. That's what he's going to try to make you forget. Harry held this. He held it the way he held things, carefully, like the galleon in the vault, like the wand, like the paper with his parents' figures on it. Okay, he said. Okay, Wednesday said, and went back to her tea. The reporter in green robes found them on the way out. She had been waiting, or strategically positioned, which was a more professional way of describing the same thing, near the entrance to the leaky cauldron, and when Gomez led the family back through Diagon Alley she materialized from a doorway with a quill already moving in the air beside her. Mr. Potter, she called. Just a moment, Rita Skeeter, Daily Prophet. I was hoping for just a quick word. Harry stopped. Gomez stopped beside him, which was interesting. He didn't step forward, didn't position himself in front of Harry, just stopped beside him, which said something about what he thought Harry could handle. The reporter was a woman with blonde hair constructed with evident effort and large jeweled spectacles and the particular forward energy of someone who has written enough stories to know that the first 30 seconds determines everything. Mr. Potter, she said again, slightly breathless, her quill doing small circles in the air. You've been seen in Diagon Alley twice this summer, apparently in the company of. She glanced at Gomez with an expression that combined curiosity and caution in about equal measure, an unknown family. The wizarding world is very interested to know where you've been all these years, and who these people are. Harry looked at her. He looked at the quill. He thought about what Wednesday had said about partial truths and what they were missing. Ms. Skeeter, he said, and his voice was steady in a way that seemed to slightly surprise her, I'm Harry Potter and I'm 11 years old and I'm going to Hogwarts in September. I've been living in Surrey. He paused. Is there a specific question? Skeeter blinked. Her quill hesitated slightly. Well, yes, the question of where you've been living, who you've been with. I've been living with the Addams family, Harry said. This is Gomez Addams. He looked at Gomez, who nodded pleasantly at the reporter. They're my family. Your family, Skeeter repeated, and the quill was moving faster now. But the Dursleys, your aunt and uncle, are the subject of ongoing legal proceedings, Gomez said, and he said it with such breezy smoothness that it landed before Skeeter could react to it. "I'm afraid we can't speak to those matters specifically. But I would be happy to give you a general statement, Miss Skeeter, if you're interested." The reporter looked at him. She was very good at her job, and being very good at her job meant she recognized when she was being offered something carefully calibrated. She accepted it anyway, because you don't survive in her business by refusing information just because it comes with conditions. "Please," she said. "Harry Potter is doing extremely well," Gomez said, "and has been enrolled at Hogwarts with all appropriate documentation. He is looking forward enormously to his first year. His guardianship arrangements are, as I believe your readers would be interested to know, currently the subject of formal review by the Ministry of Magic." He smiled. "That's the statement. Print it as you like." Skeeter's quill was moving very fast. "And the guardianship review, can you say anything more specific about?" "Not at this stage," Gomez said, pleasantly final. He touched Harry's shoulder lightly. "Enjoy your day, Miss Skeeter." They walked past her. Behind them, Harry heard the quill still moving. "That was deliberate," Harry said to Gomez, as they went through the pub. "Entirely," Gomez said. "You wanted it in the paper." "I wanted the phrase formal review by the Ministry of Magic in the paper," Gomez said. "Specifically in relation to your guardianship. Before the ministry has had time to prepare a response to our filings." Harry thought about this. "Is that legal?" he asked. "Completely," Gomez said. "It's public record. We filed it this morning." "Okay," Harry said. He paused. "That's quite clever." "Thank you," Gomez said, and if he was pleased, he wore it lightly. They came back out into the London afternoon and Lurch was waiting with the car and Pugsley climbed in and immediately began comparing the morning's events to a series of battles he'd read about in one of Fester's history books, and Fester was telling Hedwig, who was somehow already in the car, which Harry had stopped questioning, about a particularly fine beetle he'd spotted near the Gringotts entrance. Wednesday got in the car and sat back and said, to the window, the quill was recording more than she was writing. "I know," Gomez said, settling into the front. "She'll have background material. She'll use it eventually." She looked at Harry like he was a story, Wednesday said, with the specific disapproval of someone who objects to the reduction of a person to a narrative. "He is a story," Gomez said. "He's also a person. Miss Skeeter is going to learn, in the coming months, that those two things are not always compatible with her preferred approach to journalism." Harry, in the back, turned to look out the window at London going by. He had his school list in his pocket and his vault receipt and the folder of copied registry documents that Gomez had passed him to carry. He had Hedwig on the seat next to him, regarding him with calm yellow eyes. "I have everything I need," he said, and meant it practically. The school supplies were complete, the list was checked, but it came out sounding like something larger. Pugsley looked at him. "Except a chess set," Pugsley said. "You don't have a chess set." "I'm not sure I know how to play chess," Harry said. "I'll teach you," Wednesday said, from the other side. "She'll destroy you," Pugsley said, helpfully. "But the teaching part is good." Harry looked between them. He looked at the folder in his lap and the wand in his pocket and Hedwig beside him, and Gomez's voice from the front seat talking to Morticia about what response they expected from the ministry and the timeline for Dumbledore's likely awareness of the filings, and Fester's voice from the other front seat telling a story about Venice that seemed to involve both a gondola and a significant legal misunderstanding. The car moved through London. Harry thought about Hogwarts, September 1st, the Hogwarts Express, a train that went somewhere real. He thought about sorting in houses and the Hollyann Phoenix feather wand and the fact that somewhere in the world there was another wand with the same core and he had just been told that quite casually, as if it were an interesting footnote. He thought about Dumbledore, who was going to hear about the filings and who was going to come to Privet Drive or send someone to Privet Drive, and about Wednesday's words, "Your consent, that's what he's going to make you forget," and he held that knowledge the way he held all the important things now, not fearfully, but steadily, as something that belonged to him. He thought about the marks on the wall of the cupboard. He thought about how he'd made them to keep track of time because time had felt like the only thing he could count, the only proof that something was passing and that eventually something would change. He had not needed the marks since July. He settled back into the seat. Hedwig ruffled her feathers and then settled too. Outside, London gave way to the motorway, and the motorway gave way to the greener suburban orderliness of Surrey, and ahead of them, Privet Drive was waiting with its unchanged beige curtains and its hanging baskets, and inside number 4, which smelled of Morticia's herbs and old books and Fester's beetle catalogues and Gomez's cigars, there was a room with dark walls and a bookshelf and an anatomical diagram of a creature that didn't exist, and a birthday candle stub on the kitchen windowsill, and a perch for Hedwig that Lurch had built from scratch. Harry's things were there. He was going home. That evening, Gomez received 2 owls within 20 minutes of each other. The first was the ministry's acknowledgement of the guardianship challenge filing, a standard form letter, bureaucratic in tone, confirming receipt and advising that a response would be provided within 14 days as required by Section 14 of the Magical Minors Protection Act. It was signed by someone in a subdepartment Harry had never heard of and Gomez had clearly been expecting. The second was not a ministry letter. It was on thick cream parchment, in a flowing, unhurried script, and it began. Harry read it over Gomez's shoulder, which Gomez permitted without comment. Dear Mr. Addams, I write to you having been made aware, through various channels, that you have recently undertaken certain legal proceedings relating to the guardianship of Harry Potter. I am grateful for your evident care for Harry's well-being, and I hope to speak with you at your earliest convenience about certain matters which I believe are of considerable importance. I am, and have always been, Harry's most steadfast advocate, and I am certain that once we have spoken, many apparent concerns will be resolved. Yours, with great respect, Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore Headmaster, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry Supreme Mugwump, International Confederation of Wizards Chief Warlock of the Wizengamot. Gomez read it. He read it again. He set it on the table. Wednesday, who had read it from across the table without anyone moving, said, he didn't ask. He stated. I am certain that once we have spoken, many apparent concerns will be resolved. He's already decided the meeting's outcome. Yes, Gomez said. That's quite arrogant, Harry said. It's the arrogance of a man who has never had his decision seriously challenged, Gomez said. He picked up his pen. Let's write him back. He wrote, in his own elegant hand, quickly and without hesitation, Dear Headmaster Dumbledore, thank you for your letter. I would be delighted to meet at your earliest convenience. I propose this Saturday at 10 o'clock at number 4, Privet Drive. Please note that Harry will be present at this meeting. Warmly, Gomez Addams. He read it once, then added a postscript P.S. I have also engaged the services of a wizarding legal consultant whose particular area of expertise is magical minors law. She will also be present. He folded it and gave it to the owl that had delivered Dumbledore's letter, which had been sitting on the windowsill with the patient authority of a Hogwarts owl that was accustomed to important correspondence, and the owl took it and left. Gomez picked up his brandy. Saturday, Harry said. Saturday, Gomez agreed. Who's the legal consultant? Pugsley asked. You said she. A woman I spoke to on Wednesday, Gomez said. Her name is Amelia Bones. She recently retired from the Department of Magical Law Enforcement after 32 years. She agreed, after I explained the situation to her, to consult on this matter for a very reasonable fee. He paused. She also said, and I quote, it's about bloody time. Harry sat with Saturday in his chest, not heavily, not with dread, but with the clean weight of something real that was coming and that he had decided he was ready for. Okay, he said. We should eat, Morticia said, from where she was already putting dinner on the table, and the conversation distributed itself into the ordinary business of the evening, plates and passing and Fester explaining at some length why the magnificent Derek was displaying unusual behavior that might indicate rain, and Pugsley going through the legal books on the shelf with genuine enthusiasm and asking questions that Gomez answered seriously, every one. Harry ate his dinner. He thought about Saturday. He was ready. Chapter 4, The Sorting and the Scar. Saturday came and went like a controlled detonation. Dumbledore arrived at precisely 10 o'clock, which told Gomez something useful about the man before he'd said a word. He was punctual in the way that powerful people are punctual when they want to establish that they take a meeting seriously without appearing to need it. He came alone, which was either confidence or miscalculation, and Gomez had not yet decided which. He was everything the photograph in Harry's school book had suggested: tall, ancient, silver-bearded, robes of deep blue scattered with small silver stars, half-moon spectacles catching the morning light, and he stood on the front step of number 4 and looked at the house with an expression that took him approximately 2 seconds to compose into something neutral. Those 2 seconds told Gomez a great deal. The house was not what Dumbledore had expected. The house was not what anyone expected, which was, Gomez had always felt, the highest compliment a house could receive. The suits of armor in the hallway were visible through the open door. The smell of Morticia's morning herbs drifted out onto the step. From somewhere upstairs came the distant rhythmic sound of Pugsley doing something that was going to require explanation eventually. Gomez opened the door fully and smiled. "Headmaster," he said. "Come in." Dumbledore came in. His eyes, very blue, very sharp, with the quality of looking at you and simultaneously at something just behind you, moved through the hallway with the inventory speed of a man who catalogues everything as standard practice. He looked at the armor. He looked at Morticia's plants, which were on the hallway table and doing their slow reaching. He looked at Thing, which was on the telephone table sorting correspondence, and Thing looked back. Then he looked past Gomez, and his eyes found Harry. Harry was standing at the kitchen doorway, leaning against the frame with his arms folded and his expression composed. He had decided, this morning, standing in front of the mirror with his Hogwarts robes on because he'd wanted to see what it felt like, what face he was going to wear for this conversation. He had decided on the face he wore when he was genuinely paying attention, not hostile, not performing, just present and specific. He had not wanted to signal anxiety because he did not feel anxious. He wanted to signal exactly what he felt, which was, "I see you, I am not afraid of you, and I have questions." Dumbledore looked at him and something moved through the old man's expression, something that Harry noticed and filed and did not yet name. "Harry," Dumbledore said. His voice was warm and measured and had the quality of a voice that had practiced warmth long enough that it had become entirely natural, which was its own kind of thing. "Hello," Harry said. "Not sir. Not professor. Just hello, straightforward, one person to another." Dumbledore's expression did a small recalibration that he controlled immediately. Amelia Bones was already in the kitchen, at the table, with 2 folders in front of her and a cup of tea she hadn't touched. She was a broad-shouldered witch with a monocle and short gray hair and the particular stillness of someone who has spent 3 decades in a law enforcement role and learned to conserve movement for when it counts. She looked at Dumbledore when he walked in and she said, "Albus," in the tone of someone greeting a professional counterpart with whom they have a long and not uncomplicated history. "Amelia," Dumbledore said, and something in his voice had adjusted, a small recalibration, the second one in 40 seconds. "I wasn't aware you'd be joining us." "You weren't meant to be," Amelia said pleasantly. Gomez gestured to the chair across from Amelia and Dumbledore sat in it with the composed ease of a man who sits in unexpected situations as a matter of professional routine. Gomez sat to Dumbledore's left. Morticia sat at the far end of the table with a cup of tea she was not drinking, her posture perfect, her expression the expression she wore when she was listening completely, which looked from the outside like serenity and was, in practice, something considerably more focused. Harry sat between Gomez and the kitchen wall. Not hiding. Just placed, in the room, at the table, part of this. Wednesday was not in the room. Wednesday was in the hallway, which had a clear sight line to the kitchen table, and she had a notebook. Dumbledore looked at Harry again and then at Gomez. "Mr. Addams," he said, "I want to begin by saying that your care for Harry is evident and is something I deeply appreciate. The circumstances by which he came to be with your family were," he paused, and the pause was calibrated, irregular, and I take some responsibility for the fact that communication was not what it should have been. Some responsibility, Gomez said. Yes, Dumbledore said. His tone was gentle and firm in equal measure, the tone of a man who has managed difficult conversations from the senior position for so long it has become his default register. I'd like to hear which parts you're taking responsibility for, Gomez said, specifically. A brief pause. The lack of adequate follow-up on Harry's living conditions, Dumbledore said. I trusted that the protections in place would be sufficient. I see now that more regular oversight was warranted. The protections in place, Gomez said. There is a magical protection, Dumbledore said, connected to Harry's blood relationship with his mother's family. His mother's sacrifice created a bond, a very powerful one, and while Petunia Dursley kept Harry under her roof, that protection was active. It was a significant and serious consideration in placing Harry there. Mr. Dumbledore, Amelia said, opening her first folder, I want to address the protection argument directly. Under Section 11 of the Magical Minors Protection Act, and under the established precedents in Wiggenweld vs. The Ministry, 1967, the invocation of a blood-based protective construct does not supersede a guardian's duty of care to the minor in question. The protection you're describing, if valid, protects Harry from external magical threat. It does not license the guardian family to neglect, malnourish, or confine him. Dumbledore looked at her. That's technically accurate, he said. Not just technically, Amelia said, with the precision of someone who dislikes when technical accuracy is distinguished from moral accuracy. What I want to know, Harry said, from his place at the table, and every adult in the room looked at him, is whether you knew. Dumbledore turned to him fully. Harry, whether you knew what it was like in there, Harry said. His voice was level and clear and slightly careful, the way it was when he was saying something he'd thought about in advance. Not just whether you knew I was there. Whether you knew what it was like. Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I suspected that the environment was not ideal. Not ideal, Harry said. The kitchen was very quiet. I was in a cupboard, Harry said. Under the stairs. For 10 years. With a bolt on the outside. I counted days on the wall. He held Dumbledore's gaze without difficulty, without theater. You suspected it was not ideal. The word ideal sat on the table between them like something dead. Dumbledore took a breath. Harry, I want you to understand that every decision I made was in service of your consent, Wednesday said, from the hallway, and her voice was perfectly conversational, as if she were contributing to a normal discussion. Everyone turned. She was leaning against the doorframe with her notebook. He's going to explain what he did and why. He won't account for the fact that you never had any choice. Dumbledore looked at her. I don't believe we've been introduced, he said. Wednesday Addams, she said. And the introduction isn't relevant to whether I'm right. Something moved in Dumbledore's eyes. It was quick and controlled and might have been respect, or might have been the recalibration that intelligent people make when they encounter someone they hadn't factored into their calculations. He looked at Wednesday for a moment longer than he'd looked at anything else in the room. Then he turned back to Harry. You're right, he said, and he said it simply, without the warm voice overlay, just the words. I made decisions about your life without your knowledge or consent. You were a child and that was inevitable, to some degree. Children cannot consent to all decisions made on their behalf. But I understand why you feel. I'm not asking how you understand what I feel, Harry said. I'm asking whether you're going to keep making decisions about my life without talking to me. Another brief silence. I hope, Dumbledore said carefully, that going forward, we can have a more open dialogue. That would be a yes, Harry said. No. The answer is no. You're not going to keep making decisions about my life without talking to me. Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at Gomez, and in that look was the question that the whole morning had been building to, who are you, and what have you done with this child? Gomez met the look with complete equanimity. Harry, he said, without looking away from Dumbledore, would you mind giving us a few minutes? I'd like to discuss some of the legal specifics with Headmaster Dumbledore, and some of them are a bit dry. I'd rather stay, Harry said. You can, Gomez said. But if you want tea, this might be a good moment to make it. Harry looked at him. He understood the communication. I need to have a version of this conversation that benefits from your absence. He thought about whether to push it and decided that Gomez had earned the trust, so far, that made the deciding easy. He got up and made tea, and while he stood at the kettle with his back partly to the table, he listened. Mr. Dumbledore, Gomez said, and his voice had a different quality now, still warm, still controlled, but with something beneath it that had been kept carefully under wraps until this moment, the way a very good blade stays in its sheath until the exact right second. I have filed, as of Thursday, a formal challenge to the guardianship records under Section 14. I have separately filed a notice of intent to contest the terms of the original will placement. Amelia has prepared a summary of the legal basis for both. But I want to speak to you directly, outside the formal channels, before we proceed. Dumbledore waited. I'm not interested in destroying you, Gomez said. I want to be clear about that. I understand that you are a man who made choices he believed were right, under pressure, in circumstances that were genuinely dangerous, and that the reasoning behind those choices had a logic I can follow even when I find it indefensible. He paused. But I'm going to pursue these filings. I am going to establish, through the Wisingamot if necessary, that what was done to Harry was not lawful and was not adequately overseen. I will call witnesses. I will produce documentation. And I am exceptionally good at this. Dumbledore was quiet. What I want from you, Gomez said, is not an agreement to stop fighting. I want transparency. I want Harry to know everything that is relevant to his own safety, his own history, and his own future. Not when you decide he's ready. Now. He leaned forward slightly. He is ready. I've watched this child receive information about things that would unsettle most adults, and he has handled every piece of it with more grace than the adults who kept it from him. He's ready. Dumbledore looked at the table. There are things, he said, that if known, could put Harry in danger. There are things Harry is already in danger from, Gomez said. And knowing about them would let him prepare. The argument that ignorance is protective has a weight limit, Mr. Dumbledore, and you have exceeded it. Harry poured tea. He kept his back neutral. Let me ask you something, Gomez said. When you placed Harry with the Dursleys, did you check the cupboard? The silence that followed was a very specific kind, not the silence of someone thinking, but the silence of someone sitting with something they already know. No, Dumbledore said. Did you go inside the house? I did not, Dumbledore said quietly. You left a child on a doorstep, Gomez said, and there was no heat in it, just the steady weight of a fact. You left him with people you hadn't verified, in a house you hadn't entered, and you went away and you checked, as far as I can determine from the records, twice in the following 10 years. Twice. In letters. Dumbledore took off his half-moon spectacles and held them. It was the first time since he'd walked in that he'd done anything with his hands that wasn't controlled. I know, he said. I know that you know, Gomez said. That's not what I'm establishing. What I'm establishing is that I know too, and that I have documentation, and that we're going to have this conversation in front of the Wisingamot whether you prefer that or not. And if I cooperate? Dumbledore said. Then the Wisingamot proceeding is about accountability and structural reform rather than the personal destruction of a man who made a terrible choice under terrible pressure, Gomez said. That's the better outcome. For everyone. Dumbledore looked at Amelia, who was watching him with the expression of someone who has been waiting a long time for this particular conversation and feels, about it, something in the range of grim professional satisfaction. What do you need from me? Dumbledore asked. Full disclosure, Amelia said, opening her second folder. Every communication and filing related to Harry's placement. Every decision made under the overseer powers. Every piece of documentation related to the circumstances of his parents' deaths and the events of the night of October 31st, 1981. She looked at him. All of it. Some of that material, Dumbledore said, concerns matters that go beyond Harry's case. We can apply appropriate redactions to information that isn't relevant to Harry specifically, Amelia said. We're not asking for everything you know about the war. We're asking for everything that concerns this child. Dumbledore was quiet for a long time. Harry came back to the table with the tea. He set a cup in front of Dumbledore, the automatic courtesy of it, the simple act of pouring someone a cup of tea, and Dumbledore looked at the cup and then at Harry. You were very brave, Harry, Dumbledore said. In that cupboard. All those years. You were very brave. Harry sat down. He looked at the old man and he thought about what bravery meant when you hadn't been given any other option, and he thought about what you were supposed to do with a compliment about something that shouldn't have needed courage at all. I want to know about my parents, he said. I know, Dumbledore said. Then tell me. And Dumbledore told him, not everything, because it was clear from the pauses and the careful phrasing that there were things still withheld, but more than Harry had ever known. He told him about Lily and James, about the prophecy, about Voldemort's hunt and the Fidelius charm and the night at Godric's Hollow. He told it carefully and clearly and Harry sat and listened, and when Dumbledore got to the part where Hagrid had taken Harry from the rubble of the house, there was rubble, Harry held this. Harry's face did not perform grief but something passed through it that was very private and very complete. Gomez had his pen. He wrote nothing during this part. When Dumbledore finished, there was a silence, and then Harry said, the prophecy. What does it say exactly? A pause. I'll provide a full written account, Dumbledore said, to Gomez. As part of the disclosure. Harry asked the question, Gomez said. There is one born as the 7th month dies, Dumbledore said, after a moment, and quoted it, quietly, the whole of it. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, and the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal. And Harry listened to it and when it was done he was quiet for a moment. That was written about me before I was born, Harry said. Yes, Dumbledore said. And you've been making decisions about my life based on it. A pause. Yes. Without telling me. You were a child, I'm still a child, Harry said. I'm 11. That hasn't stopped being true. But you're telling me now because he's making you. He looked at Gomez without heat, just clarity. And that's fine. At least it's happening. He looked back at Dumbledore. But you should understand that I'm going to know everything relevant to my own life. That's how it's going to work now. Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, with something that was quiet and possibly genuine, you remind me of your mother. Harry held this. I'll take that, he said. Dumbledore left an hour later with a formal agreement to provide full disclosure, witnessed by Amelia, signed by Dumbledore himself, 2 copies, and the expression of a man who had walked in expecting to resolve a situation and was leaving having been resolved himself. Not defeated. Resolved. Redirected, the way water is redirected, not stopped, just made to flow somewhere more accountable. Gomez closed the front door and stood in the hallway. Well, he said. He's not a bad man, Harry said, from the kitchen doorway, because he'd been thinking about this through the whole meeting. He's just been the most powerful person in the room for so long he forgot that rooms have other people in them. Wednesday, coming down the hallway from wherever she'd been, said, that's a fairly sophisticated reading. Is it wrong? Harry said. She considered. No, she said. Then it's just a reading, Harry said. September 1st arrived the way significant days arrive when you've been anticipating them, both slowly and suddenly, the weeks between collapsing into a compressed set of moments that Harry could recall in sequence but that seemed, in memory, to have happened almost simultaneously. There was the night Morticia had sat with him in the kitchen after everyone else was asleep, and he'd asked her, quietly, what she thought Hogwarts would be like, and she had said, in her measured unhurried way, "I think it will be full of people who have never met anyone like you. That is either very good or very interesting, and I suspect both." And he had said, "Are you going to miss me?" And she had looked at him with the full weight of her attention, the kind of attention that felt, when directed at you, like being told a very important truth, and said, enormously, "Darling," and that had been that. There was the morning Gomez had knocked on his door and come in and sat on the edge of the bed and handed Harry a small brass compass, not Pugsley's, not a compass, a different one, old and well made, and said, "This belonged to your grandfather. On your father's side. It came through various channels. It's yours." And Harry had held it and said, "How did you?" And Gomez had said, "I found it in the course of the disclosure records. Dumbledore had it in a box of Potter family effects he'd apparently been keeping. We had a conversation about that." His voice had been perfectly pleasant on the last sentence. There was the morning of September 1st itself, with the platform and the barrier and King's Cross station busy around them, and Fester crying very slightly while insisting he wasn't, and Pugsley shaking Harry's hand and then hugging him, which was the first hug Pugsley had initiated and which Harry had returned without hesitation, and Hedwig ruffling her feathers on her cage, and Lurch saying, "Erg," very gently and with great feeling. And then Wednesday. She looked at him for a moment before the train came, and then she said, "The annotated book. Have you got it?" "In my trunk," he said. "Good," she said. "And Harry?" "Yeah. You know where you're from now," she said. "Don't let anyone in there make you forget it." He looked at her. He thought about a dark room with a bookshelf and a print of a creature that didn't exist, and a birthday with candles that bent toward him, and the kitchen table where he'd done his homework while Gomez built a case and Fester named beetles and Morticia's plants reached for the light. "I won't," he said. The train came. Gomez was last. He looked at Harry and did not say much, because Gomez understood when words were the smaller part of communication. He put both hands on Harry's shoulders and looked at him with the full weight of who he was, the complete and undiminished attention of a man who does not do anything by half. "You know who you are," Gomez said. "You know who your family is. Walk in there and be exactly what you are, and if anyone objects to that, write to me immediately because I will enjoy the correspondence." Harry laughed, the real one, the one that surprised him. "Okay," he said. He got on the train. The Hogwarts Express was a universe of its own, red and steam-loud and full of first-years who were all navigating the same delicate arithmetic of wanting to look like they knew what they were doing. Harry found a compartment, and was joined by a red-haired boy named Ron Weasley who ate too many sweets and talked about Quidditch with the devotion of a scholar and who looked at Harry's scar when he first saw it and then, to his considerable credit, looked away and went back to talking about the cannons, which Harry appreciated enough that he listened to the whole thing. A girl named Hermione Granger came in and asked if they'd seen a toad and told them she was Muggle-born and had already memorized most of their textbooks. Harry looked at her and recognized, in the way you recognize a thing you've seen in the mirror, the expression of someone who has spent a long time being told they were too much and has turned that into armor. He was polite to her in the specific way that says "I see you," and she blinked at him slightly, as if she'd been expecting something else from him. "I liked your section on creature taxonomy," Harry said. "In the first-year history overview. Did you read the phenomenological approach? There's a secondary text, I haven't read that one," she said, and sat down very quickly, and Ron looked between them and ate another cauldron cake. The other notable compartment visitor came near the end of the journey, when the train was already pulling through Scottish landscape that made the windows look like paintings. A pale boy with a pointed face and two large companions arrived in the doorway and looked at Harry with the expression of someone who had been preparing this entrance. "So it's true," the boy said. "Harry Potter's on the train." He looked at Ron. "And with a Weasley." The tone aimed to cut. "And you are?" Harry said. The boy looked slightly thrown by this, he'd expected either deference or hostile defensiveness, and had got neither. "Draco Malfoy," he said. "Harry Potter," Harry said. "What is it you wanted?" Another moment of recalibration. I wanted to offer you something, Malfoy said, recovering his footing. This world, you'll find that some families matter more than others. I could help you understand. I have a family, thanks, Harry said pleasantly. You have muggles, Malfoy said, and the word came out with the precise emphasis he'd been taught to put on it. I have the Addams, Harry said. Malfoy's expression did something complicated. The name had clearly landed, he knew it, from the slight flicker in his eyes, and the knowledge of it was adjusting something in his calculation. Whatever he'd been about to say next came and went. We'll see how the sorting goes, he said finally, and left. Ron looked at Harry. What was that? Someone finding their footing, Harry said, which was more charitable than Ron expected and more accurate than Ron could have known. Hermione was looking at him with interest. The Addams, she said. I've read about them. In a book about magical bloodlines. We're not magical, Harry said. Or, they're not, exactly. It's complicated. The book said they were something else entirely, Hermione said. The author seemed quite nervous about it. Harry thought about Morticia's plants reaching for her. About Fester lighting up. About things sorting mail. About the quality of the air in number 4 since the Addams had filled it. I think that's probably accurate, he said. The sorting ceremony was everything Wednesday's taxonomical account had prepared him for and also something it hadn't, which was the physical reality of it, the hall with its enchanted ceiling and its floating candles and its very old stone, and the hat on the stool, and the feeling of 1,000 people watching as each name was called. Harry stood in the line of first years and looked at the hat and thought about houses. He thought about what Wednesday had said on the train platform and what Gomez had said on the doorstep of number 4, and he thought about who he was, and the thinking of it was easy in a way it wouldn't have been 4 months ago. Potter, Harry. He walked to the stool. The hat came down. Into his head, in the private dark of the hat's interior, a voice said, dry, amused, ancient, my. You've changed since the last time I considered you. Harry's attention sharpened. You've considered me before. In anticipation, the hat said. You were expected here for many years, Mr. Potter. Though I confess I did not expect you to arrive quite so settled in yourself. A pause. Where would you like to go? You're asking me. Harry said. I always ask, the hat said. Most people just don't notice I'm asking. Harry thought about it genuinely. He thought about the houses and what they meant and what he was. He thought about Hermione, bright and armored. About Ron, straightforward and loyal and warm. He thought about Malfoy and the calculation in his eyes. I want to be somewhere I can learn, Harry said. Everything. Not just what I'm supposed to learn. Everything. That narrows it somewhat, the hat said. You have the nerve for Gryffindor, the mind for Ravenclaw, the loyalty for Hufflepuff, and, this is interesting, rather more of the Slytherin resource-maximizing intelligence than most people who end up there would be comfortable knowing you possess. Where do I belong? Harry said. Where you decide to, the hat said. That's always the answer. You know that now, don't you? Yes, Harry said. Then I'll put you in the place your instincts chose the moment you walked in, the hat said. Because you already knew. Gryffindor, the hat called out. The table in red and gold erupted. Harry took the hat off and walked to the table and sat down, and the noise wrapped around him, and Percy Weasley shook his hand and the twins grinned at him from further down, and across the hall at the staff table, Dumbledore watched him sit down with an expression that was something between relief and something less comfortable, and Harry, briefly, just once, met his gaze and held it, and looked away first only because there was more to see. At the Slytherin table, Malfoy watched him go. At the staff table, a man in a turban, Professor Quirrell, Harry had been told, Defense Against the Dark Arts, looked at Harry with his large, slightly frightened eyes and then looked at his plate, and something on the back of Harry's neck registered a cold draft that wasn't from any window. He stored this. He kept eating. He wrote his first letter home that night, sitting at the desk in his dormitory while Ron snored gently in the next bed and Hermione's owl delivered a note 3 dormitories over, because she had already decided they were friends and was acting accordingly. Dear Gomez, Harry wrote. I'm in Gryffindor. The hat asked me where I wanted to go. I thought you'd like that part. He thought about what else to write. About Malfoy and about Quirrell and about the cold draft that wasn't from a window and about the prophecy and about everything he'd been carrying since that kitchen table. Something feels off about one of the teachers, he wrote. I can't explain it yet. I'll keep watching. He paused. The hall ceiling looks like the sky. I thought you should know it's very beautiful. Harry. He added a postscript, tell Wednesday Gryffindor. She'll say she already knew. Tell her she was right. Hedwig took the letter. He turned the brass compass over in his hand twice, feeling the weight of it, the old warmth of well-kept metal, and set it on the bedside table where it caught the candlelight. He lay back in his bed in Gryffindor Tower, under a skyful of enchanted stars, and he was exactly where he was supposed to be, and he knew exactly who he was, and when the homesickness came, because it came, of course it came, soft and specific and shaped exactly like Morticia's kitchen and the scratch of Gomez's pen and Pugsley's laugh and Wednesday's precise silences, he didn't fight it. He just let it be what it was. Evidence, after all. Evidence of what he had now. Chapter 5, Gomez vs. Dumbledore. The Daily Prophet ran the story on a Thursday. It was page 3, not page 1, which Gomez had anticipated. The editor had enough political instinct to avoid putting it on the front page where it would immediately require a ministry response, so they buried it in the middle of the paper where it could be read by everyone while technically having been placed discreetly. The headline read, Ministry confirms guardianship review in Harry Potter case, questions raised over boy who lives living arrangements. Rita Skeeter had written it, and she had written it well, which Gomez noted with professional appreciation. She had used the phrase formal review by the Ministry of Magic in the third paragraph, exactly as he'd stated it on the street outside the Leaky Cauldron, and she had included a quote from an unnamed source in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement who had said, with the enthusiasm of someone who has been waiting years to say something officially unattributable, that the original placement had always been irregular in several respects. She had included a photograph of number 4, Privet Drive, which made the house look exactly as bleak as it was, and she had included, in the final paragraph, the single most important sentence in the piece, Mr. Potter was unavailable for comment, as he has recently begun his first year at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, where he is reported to be settling in extremely well. Gomez read this sentence with the satisfaction of a man who has planned a chess move 12 steps ago and is watching it arrive. He folded the paper and put it beside his coffee. They'll have seen it by breakfast at Hogwarts, Wednesday said, from across the table. She had her own copy, which she had annotated in 3 places. That's the point, Gomez said. Dumbledore will contact you today, she said. Also the point, Gomez said. He picked up the telephone and called Amelia Bones, who answered on the second ring because Amelia Bones was always at her desk before 8. I've seen it, she said, without preamble. Good morning to you as well, Gomez said. Are we ready? I filed the formal petition to the Wisengamot last night, Amelia said. The 14-day response window from the ministry expired at midnight Tuesday. They didn't respond, which means, the petition proceeds automatically to the full chamber, Gomez said. Yes. When? 3 weeks, she said. November 2nd. I've requested the full disclosure documents from Dumbledore's office under the agreement he signed. We've received approximately 40% of what was requested. Which 40%? Gomez said. The administrative paperwork, Amelia said, with the tone of someone who has seen this particular evasion before and is not impressed by it. The placement forms, the ministry co-signatures, the routine correspondence. The substantive materials, the actual decision-making records, the communications from the night of October 31st, the overseer renewal filings, those haven't come. No, Gomez said. They won't, voluntarily. He picked up his pen. We'll subpoena them. I've already drafted it, Amelia said. Amelia, Gomez said warmly, you are an absolute pleasure to work with. Don't be charming at me before 9, she said. Call me this afternoon. She hung up. Gomez put down the phone and looked at his legal pad, which was now its fourth replacement pad, the first 3 filled front to back with notes, documents, cross-references, and the particular dense network of connected facts that a complex case produces when properly worked. He had, in the weeks since Dumbledore's visit, become something of a known figure in the wizarding legal community. Not famous, Wizarding Britain was a closed enough world that an outsider, even a formidably competent one, took time to establish reputation, but known, in the way that a specific kind of energy becomes known. Several owls had arrived from parties whose names he recognized from Amelia's files, people who had grievances with the ministry's handling of post-war child placements, people who had questions about the legal basis of the overseer powers, one former Auror who had written 4 close-typed pages about things he'd seen and never reported because he hadn't known there was anywhere to report them. Gomez had written back to all of them. He had also, in the same period, continued to live in number 4, Privet Drive with Morticia and Wednesday and Pugsley and Fester and Lurch and Thing, and the house had continued its transformation into something that was nothing at all like what it had been, and the street had continued its slow and collective psychological adaptation to the Addams family, which had progressed from open curtain twitching alarm through a period of cautious avoidance and was now arriving somewhere in the vicinity of resigned fascination. Mrs. Number 3 had brought over a casserole dish 3 weeks ago, which Morticia had accepted graciously and which Fester had eaten with genuine enthusiasm and which had resulted in a 20-minute doorstep conversation about begonias that had ended with Mrs. Number 3 looking slightly different than when she'd arrived, as if something had been adjusted. She had come back twice since. Gomez found this professionally relevant. The pattern of people who approached the strange with fear and leave with something like gratitude was one he'd observed in many contexts and in many countries, and it told him things about the nature of fear itself that he found useful. He was thinking about this, and about the Wisengamot proceedings, when Dumbledore's owl arrived. It was not the patient Hogwarts owl of the previous correspondence. It was a smaller bird, grey and precise, and it delivered a single sheet of folded parchment and left without ceremony. The note said, Mr. Addams. I am aware of the petition. I would like to speak with you before the proceedings begin. I believe there are matters we can resolve between ourselves that would be better addressed without the involvement of the full Wisengamot. I ask for this conversation as a professional courtesy. A.D. Gomez read it. Then he read it again, parsing the specific words, resolved between ourselves, better addressed without professional courtesy. The language of a man who still, despite everything, believed that the conversation could be managed if the right people were in the room. He wrote back, I'm afraid I can't agree to pre-proceedings discussions that aren't attended by Harry's legal representative and documented for the record. However, I'm happy to meet with you formally in that context. Suggest we use Ms. Bones' office. GTA. He sent it. Morticia appeared in the kitchen doorway. She said, the owl had Hogwarts feathers on its feet. His own bird, Gomez said. He's worried, she said. Yes, Gomez said. He should be. He looked at her. How do you feel about a trip to the Ministry of Magic next week? Morticia considered this. I feel, she said, that I've been waiting for something to wear all this to. She gestured down at herself in a way that indicated the full black-clad architectural magnificence of whatever she was currently wearing, and Gomez looked at her with the expression he wore when the world was genuinely good and said, Cara mia. Don't distract yourself, she said. You have work to do. I can do both, he said, and she smiled, the small, real one, and went back to her plants. The formal meeting with Dumbledore happened in Amelia's office on the following Monday, and it was shorter than the first meeting and more specific. Dumbledore arrived with a solicitor, a narrow man from an old wizarding firm who gave the impression of having been employed specifically to prevent Dumbledore from saying things directly, and Gomez arrived with Amelia and a briefcase containing everything that had been disclosed so far, with extensive annotations. Dumbledore's solicitor opened with a position. The position was, in summary, the original placement was lawful, made under emergency powers that had been validly invoked, for reasons of genuine security necessity, and the Addams family's interest in Harry's care, while admirable, did not constitute grounds for a Wisingamot challenge. Gomez let him finish. Then he opened his briefcase and placed 3 documents on the table and said, "I'd like to address those points in reverse order." He addressed them in reverse order. It took 12 minutes, which was longer than necessary but short enough to suggest confidence in the terrain. The solicitor took notes. Amelia watched Dumbledore's face, which was composed and still and doing the very controlled thing that Gomez had come to recognize as its version of listening under pressure. The third point Gomez made, the one about the overseer renewal lapse, was the one that made the solicitor stop writing and look at the document Gomez was holding. Under the 1943 protocol, Gomez said, emergency overseer powers require renewal every 5 years through an active ministry filing. I have the ministry's own records here, obtained through our disclosure request, and I would like to draw your attention to the absence of any renewal filing after August 1986. Harry Potter was placed with the Dursleys in November 1981. The initial overseer authority was therefore valid through November 1986. After that date, he set the document on the table and turned it toward Dumbledore. There was no legal authority. For 5 years, Harry Potter was held in conditions we have documented, without any active legal oversight, on the basis of paperwork that had expired. The solicitor looked at his client. Dumbledore looked at the document. "Is this accurate?" the solicitor said, to the table. Dumbledore started. He stopped. He started again. "The understanding was that the protections are not the overseer powers," Gomez said. "The blood protection is a magical construct. The overseer authority is a legal one. They are separate instruments. The lapse of one does not affect the other, but the lapse of the legal instrument means that all decisions made under it after August 1986 were made without legal authority." He picked up the document and put it back in the briefcase. "That includes every year Harry spent in that cupboard after he was 5 years old." The meeting ended 40 minutes after it started. Outside in the corridor of Amelia's building, a non-ministry building in a wizarding street off Holborn that Gomez had come to think of as his second office, Amelia walked beside him and said, "The solicitor's going to advise him to produce the remaining documents." "Yes," Gomez said. "He is. Dumbledore won't like it." "No," Gomez said. "But he'll do it. He's not a man who acts against his own conscience easily. The documentation lapse, he didn't know. I watched his face. He genuinely didn't know the renewal had expired." Amelia was quiet for a moment. "That's almost worse," she said. "It is worse," Gomez said. "A deliberate crime has the advantage of at least being intended. This was negligence on a bureaucratic level that produced suffering on a human level, and the human suffering was just too far from the bureaucratic decision for anyone to connect them." He paused. "Until now. The Wisingamot is going to hate this," Amelia said. "Good," Gomez said. Harry's letters arrived every few days. They were written in a hand that was growing steadily more confident. The early ones had been careful and slightly formal, the way the writing of someone unused to being asked about themselves is careful, but by October they had relaxed into something natural and direct, and reading them, Gomez could hear Harry's voice clearly, which was one of the best things correspondents could do. The letters were about Hogwarts, which was everything Harry had imagined and several things he hadn't. He wrote about Hermione with the affectionate exasperation of someone who has found in another person a mirror held at a slightly disorienting angle. He wrote about Ron with simple warmth. He wrote about Quidditch, first watching it, then being recruited for the Gryffindor team by the Transfiguration teacher, Professor McGonagall, who had apparently witnessed Harry catch a Remembrall in a controlled dive from 40 feet and made her decision on the spot. He wrote about Quirrell. Not directly, not with names in the early letters, but with the careful circuitous language of someone describing a feeling they're still investigating. "The defense teacher makes the back of my neck cold when he's near. Not afraid cold. More like when you're near something old and wrong. I'm watching him. Gomez read this and read it again and wrote back, "Trust that instinct. Keep your distance. Do not investigate alone. Write to me if it develops." He filed a separate note in his legal pad under a new heading. He wrote 3 words, "Quarrel." The scar. Voldemort. He had been reading everything he could access about the events of October 1981, and about the nature of Voldemort's defeat, and about magical anchoring and fragmentary persistence. And what he was assembling from the pieces of it was a picture that he had not shared with Harry yet, because Harry was 11 years old and had 3 months of actual happiness behind him, and Gomez was making the specific calculation that a man who loves a child makes, not about ignorance, never about ignorance, but about timing, about giving the knowledge when the knowledge could be used rather than just carried. He had discussed this with Morticia, who had listened and then said, "He'll know before you intend to tell him. He's already working it out." "I know," Gomez said. "He won't hold the timing against you," she said. "He understands the difference between withholding and protecting." Dumbledore said the same thing, Gomez said. Morticia looked at him. "It's different when you mean it," she said. November 2nd came down on the wizarding world like a thunderclap, and the Wizengamot didn't know it yet. The chamber was everything: a room designed to make individuals feel small tries to be, old stone, high tiers of seats, the dark wood of the raised bench where the Wizengamot members sat in their plum robes, and the specific quality of silence that expensive institutional architecture produces. Gomez had been in rooms like this before, in 3 countries, and he walked into all of them the same way, with his hands in his pockets and his cigar in his breast pocket, unlit out of concession to indoor protocol, and the expression of a man who finds the furniture interesting. He was not representing himself in the technical sense. Amelia was the legal practitioner of record, because wizarding procedural rules required one, but he was present as Harry's designated guardian of record, which gave him speaking rights, and he intended to use them. Harry was not physically present. Hogwarts was in session. But Gomez had written to him about the date and what it meant, and Harry had written back a letter that Gomez had in his breast pocket, next to the unlit cigar, and he intended to read it if the occasion called for it. Morticia was in the gallery. She had chosen what she was wearing with the specific deliberateness of a woman who understands that appearance in formal settings is communication. She was in black, as always, but it was a particular black, a structured, architectural black that made everyone else in the gallery look as if they were dressed for a different occasion. When she walked in and took her seat, 3 Wizengamot members on the upper tier turned to look, and one of them forgot to stop looking until his neighbor nudged him. Wednesday was beside her, in her standard arrangement, dark dress, braids, notebook, and was already writing. Fester was on Morticia's other side, wearing a robe that was technically formal and practically alarming, and was looking at the chamber architecture with the expression of a man who finds dungeons aesthetically satisfying. The chief warlock opened the session. His name was Tiberius Ogden, and he was old and careful and possessed of the specific wariness of someone who has chaired enough difficult sessions to recognize one forming. He stated the case number, the filing basis, the parties involved. This chamber has received a formal petition challenging the guardianship arrangements of Harry James Potter, he said, and challenging the lawfulness of the original placement made under emergency overseer powers in November 1981. The petitioners are Gomez Tiberius Addams and Amelia Susan Bones. The matter will be heard today with responses invited from the ministry and from Professor Albus Dumbledore, who has agreed to provide testimony. He looked over his spectacles at Gomez. "Mr. Addams. You may proceed." Gomez stood. He stood the way he stood at the center of any room, with the absolute uncomplicated comfort of a man who has never once believed a room was not his to be in. He looked at the tiered rows of plum-robed Wizengamot members, at the ministry representatives at the side bench, at Dumbledore in the witness chair with his hands folded and his expression composed, and he said, "Good morning," in his regular voice, which in this chamber's acoustics carried everywhere without effort. "Good morning," several Wizengamot members said back, reflexively, which was not how these sessions usually began and which produced a small scatter of confused looks among the others. "I want to start," Gomez said, "not with the law, but with a fact. Because the law is going to come, and it's going to be detailed, and I want everyone in this room to have a human fact in their mind when they're processing the legal arguments. He reached into his breast pocket and unfolded Harry's letter. Not the one from this week. The first one, the letter Harry had written from Hogwarts on his first night, the one that said I'm in Gryffindor, the hat asked me where I wanted to go. This is a letter, Gomez said. It was written by Harry Potter on September 1st of this year, from Hogwarts School, where he is currently a first-year student. I'd like to read one part of it. He found the line. He writes, the hall ceiling looks like the sky. I thought you should know it's very beautiful. He folded the letter and put it back. An 11-year-old boy, Gomez said, who had spent the previous 10 years in a cupboard under a staircase, with a bolt on the outside, in a house where the adults responsible for him were not providing adequate nutrition, clothing, medical attention, or basic human acknowledgement, walked into a hall with an enchanted ceiling and his first instinct was to write home and share it. He paused. That is who this case is about, he said. Not the legal instruments. Not the ministry procedures. Not the complex security considerations that various parties will present to you today as justification. A child who, given the smallest amount of something decent, immediately wanted to share it. That is who was in the cupboard. The chamber was very quiet. Gomez reached into his briefcase. Now, he said, let's talk about the law. What followed was 90 minutes of the most thorough legal demolition the Wisingamat had seen in a generation, which several of its members acknowledged privately afterward, and one, a retired orar named Moody who had come as a spectator, said out loud. Gomez went through the original placement documentation, the emergency overseer powers invocation, the co-signatures from the ministry, the specific legal provisions that had been used. He went through them without heat, without performance, just with the clean precision of someone who has learned every inch of a terrain and moves through it without hesitation. He established the renewal lapse. He produced the ministry's own records, entered into evidence by Amelia, showing the absence of any renewal filing after 1986. He walked the chamber through what this meant in practice, that for 5 of the 10 years Harry had spent in the Dursley household, there had been no legal authority for the placement at all. I want to be specific, Gomez said, about what this means. It does not mean that the Dursleys were empowered to mistreat Harry. It means that no one was legally empowered to prevent them from doing so, because the legal instrument that created accountability had been allowed to lapse. The oversight mechanism was gone. And in the absence of oversight, he looked at the ministry bench. As we all know, human beings default to the easiest available course of action. He produced the social services documentation next. The Muggle documentation, 2 reports from Harry's primary school flagging concerns about marks and absences, 1 letter from a school nurse that had been addressed to the Dursley household and presumably ignored, 1 report from a health visitor that had been closed after a single uninvestigated home visit. He had obtained these through entirely legal Muggle channels and had them certified for Wizarding court admission by a specialist who handled cross-jurisdictional evidence. The Muggle authorities, Gomez said, flagged concerns about this child. Not once. Not twice. Repeatedly, over a period of years, through standard welfare channels. Those concerns were never followed up adequately. He looked at the chamber. A child in this country had 2 separate protective systems, Muggle and magical, and he fell through both of them. Not by accident. Not through any single failure. Through a systemic assumption that someone else was watching. He set the documents down. No one was watching, he said. Because everyone assumed the next person was. He called Amelia, who gave the formal legal summary, clean and precise and devastating in its specificity. The lapse of authority. The precedents. The ministry co-signatures. The accountability chain. Then he called Dumbledore. Dumbledore walked to the witness position. There was no box in the Wisingamat chamber, just a chair at the front of the floor, and sat, and looked at Gomez with the composed steadiness of a man who has decided what kind of day this is going to be. Headmaster, Gomez said. I want to ask you something directly, and I'd like a direct answer. "I'll do my best," Dumbledore said. "When you placed Harry Potter with the Dursley family in November 1981, Gomez said, did you believe he would be safe there?" "Yes," Dumbledore said. "Did you believe he would be happy there?" A pause. "I believed he would be protected there." "That's a different question from the one I asked," Gomez said. Dumbledore looked at him. "I hoped," he said, carefully, "that the family would find room for him." "Did you check?" "I sent a letter." "Did you visit the house?" "Go inside?" "Verify that the child had a bedroom, adequate food, clothing that fit him?" "I did not," Dumbledore said. "Did you visit at any point in the following 10 years?" "I had reports." "Did you visit the house?" Gomez said, with the patient precision of someone who is going to get the direct answer to a direct question regardless of how many approaches it takes, at any point in the 10 years during which Harry Potter was living there. "No," Dumbledore said. The chamber was quiet. "Why not?" Gomez said. Dumbledore looked at his hands. "Because I told myself the protection was sufficient," he said. "The blood protection. The wards. I told myself that the magical safeguards were what mattered, and that he paused, "the domestic arrangements were not my concern, provided the magical safeguards held." "A child's domestic arrangements are not your concern," Gomez said. "I see now that they were," Dumbledore said. "That they should have been." He looked up. "I was wrong." "Yes," Gomez said. "You were." He let the silence sit for a moment. "Not long. Just long enough. I want to ask you one more question," he said. "When you placed Harry with the Dursleys, when you made the decision to use the blood protection as the primary justification, was there any alternative you considered?" "There were several potential placements considered and dismissed," Dumbledore said. "On what basis?" "The blood protection required a blood relative," Dumbledore said. "Yes," Gomez said. "It did. I understand that. My question is, were there other options, outside the blood protection construct, that would have provided Harry with a safer and better supervised home?" Dumbledore was quiet. "There were magical families who offered," Dumbledore said finally, "in the days after the events of October 31st. Several. Who knew Harry's parents? Who offered to take him in?" "And you said no to all of them," Gomez said. "Yes," Dumbledore said. "Because you had decided the blood protection was paramount." "Yes," Dumbledore said. "And because," Gomez said, "you had decided that Harry's childhood should be," he checked his notes, quoting from the disclosure documentation, "humble and unmolded by the wizarding world's expectations." "Your phrasing. From a 1982 memo." Dumbledore looked at him. "You made a decision," Gomez said, "that Harry Potter should not know who he was or what he meant to this world, so that he would arrive at the destiny you'd planned for him appropriately unformed. The blood protection was the method. That was the goal. I was trying to protect him," Dumbledore said, and his voice had lost some of its composure, not entirely but at the edges. "From the expectations. From the pressure. From people who would have, I know what you were trying to do," Gomez said. "The intention is not in dispute. The result is." He looked at the chamber. "The result," he said, "was a boy in a cupboard. Counting days on a wall. Being told, every day of his life, that he was worthless, unwanted, a burden. Not by strangers. By family. By the people who were supposed to protect him. While the magical world, which he didn't even know he belonged to, stood outside the door, congratulating itself on keeping him safe." He stopped there. He did not need to say more. The chamber understood, and the understanding was visible in the specific stillness of people confronting something they'd been avoiding confronting. In the gallery, Morticia was watching. Wednesday had stopped writing. Fester was dabbing his eye with a handkerchief. The Wisengamot deliberated for 40 minutes. When they came back, Chief Warlock Ogden read the findings with the care of someone who understands that the document being read will be referenced for years. The original guardianship placement was found to have lapsed in its legal authority in August 1986. The conditions of Harry Potter's care during the period in question were found to represent a significant failure of the Ministry's duty to supervise and enforce the welfare provisions of the Magical Minors Protection Act. Professor Dumbledore was found to have acted with genuine intent toward Harry's safety but without adequate regard for his welfare, and his use of the emergency overseer powers was found to have exceeded the bounds of appropriate individual authority in matters of child placement. The remedies were several. New guardianship arrangements, the Addams family's formal adoption petition, which Gomez had filed 3 weeks prior, was expedited for approval. A review of all wartime child placements under emergency powers was ordered. A mandatory welfare oversight division was to be established within the ministry. And Professor Dumbledore was formally censured by the Wisengamot, the first such censure of a sitting Hogwarts headmaster in the Chamber's recorded history, and required to submit to quarterly accountability review for a period of 3 years. Dumbledore accepted this. He accepted it without the legal objections his solicitor had prepared. He stood and looked at the chief warlock and nodded, and then he turned and looked at Gomez and said, I genuinely hope, that this is better for Harry. It already is, Gomez said. He's been better since July. Dumbledore looked at him for a moment with something complicated in his face. Then he said, You're an unusual man, Mr. Addams. I've been told, Gomez said pleasantly. I meant it as a compliment, Dumbledore said. I know, Gomez said. I took it as one. Outside the chamber, in the corridor, Morticia was waiting. She looked at Gomez with the full precision of her attention, no questions, just assessment, and whatever she saw in his face satisfied her. Done, she said. Done, he said. She took his arm. They walked down the corridor of the ministry, the magical ministry, which was underground and enormous and full of witches and wizards moving through it in the purposeful way of people employed by a large bureaucracy, many of whom stopped and looked at Morticia and the man beside her with the expression people get when they see something they don't have a category for. Behind them, Wednesday had caught up, notebook closed under her arm. The censure provision is weak, she said. Quarterly review for 3 years is insufficient for the scope of the failure. It's unprecedented, Gomez said. Yes, Wednesday said. That's why it's insufficient. Unprecedented should be stronger. You're right, Gomez said. We'll push for amendment in the review period. I already drafted a letter to the review committee, Wednesday said. Gomez looked at her sideways. When? He said. Last night, she said. I expected this outcome. Of course you did, he said. Papa, she said, and it was quiet, not an address exactly, just a word that had found its way into a sentence where it hadn't previously been, write to Harry tonight. I was going to, he said. Write it tonight, she said again. He should hear what happened from you before the prophet runs it tomorrow. He looked at her. He thought about the word she'd used and what it meant and did not remark on it, because Wednesday Addams had said a private and significant thing in a public corridor and the correct response was to give it the dignity of being unremarked. Tonight, he said. Before dinner. She walked ahead of them, and Gomez looked at Morticia, and Morticia looked back at him, and what passed between them was one of those entirely wordless communications that long and absolute love produces, not a single piece of information but the whole compound weight of we did this right, didn't we, this one we did right. Fester caught up, slightly breathless, still holding his handkerchief. That was magnificent, he said. The bit about the ceiling, when you read the letter, he stopped. He cleared his throat. Very good bit. Thank you, Fester, Gomez said. Gerald Jr. would have been very moved, Fester said. If beetles are moved by legal proceedings. Which I think they are. Derek certainly looked moved this morning. He's a sensitive beetle, Morticia said. Tremendously sensitive, Fester agreed. They came up from the ministry into the grey London afternoon, a nondescript telephone box returning them to a street near Holborn, the unremarkable exit of a remarkable building, and Gomez stood on the pavement for a moment and breathed the outside air and thought about Harry, in Gryffindor Tower, 300 miles north, probably at dinner now, probably eating with Ron and Hermione and not yet knowing what this afternoon had done. He thought about writing the letter. About what to say and how to say it, and the specific pleasure of being able to say it went well. We won, you are formally, legally, unambiguously ours. He thought about what Harry had said, quietly, at the kitchen table back in July, when Gomez had told him he had time to understand things. That's all right. You have time to understand it. We're not going anywhere. That had been a promise, stated as a fact, the way the best promises are made. He took out his pen and his notebook, standing on the Holborn pavement with Morticia beside him and Wednesday already walking ahead and Fester talking to himself about beetles, and he wrote the first line of the letter right there, because some things shouldn't wait for a desk. Dear Harry. It went exactly as it should have. You are, as of this afternoon, officially and entirely ours. He capped the pen. Around him, London moved with its standard indifference to the significant moments happening within it, and the ministry hummed somewhere underground, and 300 miles north a boy with a lightning bolt scar was about to sit down to dinner in a hall with a ceiling like the sky. Gomez put the notebook away and walked after his family. Chapter 6, Where He Belongs. The letter arrived at breakfast on a Friday. Harry was midway through a plate of eggs when Hedwig landed on the table in front of him with the particular authority she reserved for important deliveries, not the casual arrival she made for Hermione's notes or Ron's Quidditch updates, but a full, deliberate descent, wings folded with ceremony, yellow eyes fixed on Harry as if to say pay attention to this one. He put down his fork. The letter was heavier than usual. 2 sheets, Gomez's handwriting on both, and a third page in Wednesday's smaller script tucked behind them. Harry unfolded the first sheet and read it, and Ron, who had been talking about the cannons, stopped talking about the cannons because Harry's face was doing something that required attention. Harry read it once. Then he turned back to the beginning and read it again, slower, the way you read things you want to be sure are real. Dear Harry. It went exactly as it should have. You are, as of this afternoon, officially and entirely ours. The Wisingamot found in our favor on all principal counts. The original placement has been formally ruled to have exceeded lawful authority. The ministry has been ordered to establish adequate oversight procedures for all similar cases. Dumbledore has been formally censured, the first such censure of a sitting Hogwarts headmaster in the Chamber's history, which I mention not to diminish him but because I think the historical specificity is the kind of thing you deserve to know. More importantly, our formal adoption petition has been expedited. The paperwork goes through in 30 days. Legally, formally, on paper and in fact, you are Harry Addams. Though I want to be clear, and I am going to say this as directly as I know how, you are not required to use that name if you don't want to. You are Harry Potter. Your parents named you and that name belongs to you. What changes is not your name unless you want it to. What changes is who stands behind it. We'll be at King's Cross on December 23rd. All of us. Lurch is bringing the car. Your father, Gomez. Harry put the letter down. He looked at the plate of eggs. He looked at the great hall around him, the Friday morning noise of it, the hundreds of students, the enchanted ceiling doing a grey November sky, the candles floating in the cold air. He looked at Ron, who was watching him with the careful attention of a friend who knows something significant is happening and is giving it space. Good news? Ron said. Harry considered the question. Yes, he said, and his voice came out slightly different than usual, quieter, more settled, the way a voice sounds when the person speaking it has just had something confirmed that they've been hoping was true but hadn't wanted to depend on until it was certain. Really good news, Ron said, reading his face. Yeah, Harry said. He turned to Wednesday's note. It was shorter, 3 paragraphs in her precise hand, each one compact and complete. The censure provision is inadequate and I've already written to the review committee. Don't thank me, it's self-interested. I want the precedent to be strong enough to hold for the next case. Dumbledore accepted the ruling without legal challenge. I think this is worth noting because it tells you something about him that the rest of the proceedings don't quite capture. He is a man who genuinely believed he was right and has genuinely discovered he wasn't. That is rarer than it sounds and more uncomfortable than most people can tolerate. He'll be worth watching at Hogwarts this year, not with suspicion, but with the specific attention you give someone who is in the process of reconsidering themselves. People like that are either more dangerous or more useful than they were before. I haven't determined which yet. Pugsley has blown up the back garden shed. He says to tell you it was magnificent and he's sorry you missed it. Fester named the largest fragment Gerald III. The main structure is gone but the begonias survived, which Mother says is their own fault for being so aggressively cheerful. Harry read this twice also. He folded both letters and put them in his breast pocket, next to his chest, next to the brass compass that he carried everywhere. Harry, Hermione said, from his other side. She had her own stack of Morning Post and had been reading while pretending not to watch him. Are you all right? More than all right, he said. She looked at him for a moment, the specific look she gave things she was trying to understand quickly, and then she nodded, and that was that, and she went back to her letter, which appeared to be from her parents and which she read with a warmth that she didn't usually display in public, and Harry watched her and thought about the word his father had used. Father. He turned it over. He let it sit. He didn't reach for it or push it away, just let it exist in his chest alongside the compass and the letters and the fact of 30 days until the paperwork made permanent what had been true since July. It fit. That was all. It just fit. Across the hall, at the Slytherin table, Draco Malfoy was reading his own Morning Post, and whatever he was reading had made his face do something controlled and closed. Harry noticed this in the peripheral way he noticed most things, filed it, held it lightly, let it inform without directing. He had been noticing Malfoy for 3 months with the patient attention Wednesday had recommended for anything requiring assessment, and what he'd assembled was a more complicated picture than the pointed-faced boy in the compartment had suggested. Malfoy was performing. Consistently, elaborately, performing the version of himself that his upbringing had decided he should be, and there was a difference, sometimes small, sometimes larger, between the performance and the person underneath it, and Harry had seen that difference flicker in a handful of moments that Malfoy hadn't managed to control, the way he'd looked when the first years laughed at one of the twins' jokes, the way he'd watched Neville practice Wingardium Leviosa with the expression of someone who wanted to offer help and had been taught that this was weakness. The gap between the Malfoy who existed and the Malfoy who had been manufactured. Harry understood that gap intimately. He'd lived in it for 10 years. He had not tried to befriend Malfoy. But he had not treated him as simply an antagonist, and this had produced a series of encounters that were neither friendship nor enmity, which Malfoy appeared to find genuinely disorienting, which was probably useful in ways that hadn't yet become clear. Quirrell was at the staff table, eating very little, looking at no one. Harry looked at him. The cold draft was there, it had been there every time Quirrell was near, since September, a specific quality of wrongness that Harry had been carefully mapping. He'd done it the way Gomez did everything, methodically, without jumping to conclusions, building a picture from accumulated evidence rather than leaping to the largest possible interpretation. Evidence, the cold draft, specific to Quirrell's proximity. Evidence, Quirrell's behavior on Halloween night, when a troll had somehow entered the castle and Quirrell's response had been to faint immediately and decoratively in the Great Hall while the troll found its way to where Hermione was hiding in the bathroom. Evidence, Quirrell's lessons, which were technically correct and substantively empty in the way that lessons taught by someone performing competence rather than possessing it tend to be. Evidence, the thing Quirrell had been doing during the Quidditch match in October, Harry had seen it from the air, a sustained, focused look at Harry's broom, and he'd noted it and said nothing and landed and gone to find Hermione, who had found a reasonable explanation, and then a better one, and then the true one. Evidence, accumulated and cross-referenced, something was using Quirrell. Harry had written to Gomez about it 3 weeks ago, in a letter that had taken him 4 drafts to calibrate, detailed enough to communicate, careful enough not to alarm, specific enough to be useful. Gomez had written back within 2 days. The letter had been direct and clear and had contained 3 things: a summary of what Gomez knew about Voldemort's potential for non-corporeal persistence, which was detailed and disturbing and presented without softening, a clear instruction to tell no one at Hogwarts yet, specifically not Dumbledore, because they needed to understand what they were dealing with before they involved parties whose responses they couldn't predict, and a third thing, at the bottom of the page, that Harry had read several times: "You've been doing exactly what you should be doing, watching, building your picture, not acting until you understand. That is not the instinct of a child. That is the instinct of someone who understands that information is more valuable than reaction. I am enormously proud of you. Trust it. Trust yourself." Harry ate his eggs. He looked at Quirrell. He thought about the third-floor corridor, which was prohibited and which everyone therefore knew about, and the dog he'd heard through the door on Halloween, the 3-headed dog, and the trapdoor, and the thing beneath the trapdoor that the teachers were protecting, and the way Quirrell looked at certain sections of the library when he thought no one was watching. He thought about the prophecy, the one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord, marked as his equal. He thought about what Wednesday had said about Dumbledore reconsidering himself. About useful versus dangerous. He made a decision. After breakfast, he went to Professor McGonagall's office. She was at her desk, marking third-year Transfiguration essays with the expression of someone who has read the same error 11 times and is maintaining professional equilibrium by force of will. She looked up when Harry knocked. "Potter," she said. "Sit down." He sat. She looked at him with the sharp attention that McGonagall brought to everything, not unkind, but precise, the attention of someone who wastes very little and misses nothing. "Something on your mind?" she said. "I need to speak to Professor Dumbledore," Harry said. "Today, if possible." She set down her quill. "About?" "Something I've been watching," Harry said. "Something I think he needs to know." She looked at him for a moment, the specific look of someone assessing whether the thing in front of them is a student with ordinary concerns or something requiring a different kind of response. "I'll arrange it," she said. "After lunch." "Thank you," Harry said. He stood to go, then stopped. "Professor Potter?" "The adoption was confirmed today," he said. "Through the Wisengamot." He wasn't sure why he was telling her. Something about the way she'd looked at him on the Quidditch pitch, when she'd seen him catch the Remembrall, like she was seeing someone arrive. "I thought you should know. In case the records need updating." McGonagall was quiet for a moment. She looked at him with something that crossed her face quickly and was replaced by her standard expression, but Harry had seen it. "Congratulations, Potter," she said, and her voice was warm under the precision, genuinely warm. "I'm glad." He nodded and left. Dumbledore's office was at the top of a spiral staircase accessed through a gargoyle that stepped aside when McGonagall gave it the password, and it was everything an office belonging to Albus Dumbledore should be: circular, full of softly whirring instruments, portraits of former headmasters dozing in their frames, a magnificent bird on a perch that Harry recognized as a phoenix from Wednesday's taxonomy book, and the sorting hat on its shelf, apparently asleep. Dumbledore was at his desk and he rose when Harry came in. He looked different from the man who had come to Privet Drive in August. Not physically, the silver beard and the half-moon spectacles and the elaborate robes were the same, but there was something in the way he moved and looked and held himself that had changed. A quality that had been absolute was now provisional. He was thinking differently, and the thinking showed. "Harry," he said. "Sit down, please." Harry sat. "I believe," Dumbledore said, settling into his own chair, "that congratulations are in order. I received the Wisengamot notification this morning." "Thank you," Harry said. "The Addams family," Dumbledore said. He said the name with the careful attention of someone who has been thinking about it for months and still hasn't fully categorized what they're thinking. "They are unusual." "Yes," Harry said. "Are you happy?" Dumbledore said, and it was the directest question he had asked Harry since their first meeting, and it had the quality of a question that had been waiting a long time to be asked. Harry looked at him. "Yes," he said. "I am." Dumbledore looked at his desk. "Good," he said. "That is that is what I should have made my primary concern, years ago. That word. Happy." He looked up. "I failed you, Harry. I want to say that directly, he paused, without the qualifications I've been attaching to it." "I know," Harry said. "Can you?" Dumbledore started, and stopped, and started again. "I don't have a right to ask for your forgiveness. I want to be clear about that. I'm not asking for it." "I know," Harry said again. "What are you asking for?" Dumbledore said. Harry looked at the phoenix on its perch. The bird looked back at him with dark eyes that were enormously old and genuinely warm, and Harry thought about what it meant that Dumbledore kept a phoenix, specifically, a bird that burned and came back, that made the worst possible thing a beginning rather than an end. "I'm not asking for anything," Harry said. "I came to tell you something." Dumbledore waited. "Quirrell," Harry said. Something shifted in Dumbledore's face, not surprise exactly, but the particular shift of someone who has been carrying a suspicion alone and has just heard someone else confirm it. "Tell me what you know," Dumbledore said, and his voice was entirely different now, stripped of everything decorative, just direct and focused and listening. Harry told him. All of it, the cold draft, the Halloween troll, the Quidditch match, the library patterns, the three-headed dog and the trapdoor and the thing beneath it, and what he'd worked out, from Gomez's letter and from his own thinking, about Voldemort's non-corporeal persistence and what Quirrell was being used for. He spoke without drama, without the performed casualness of someone trying to look braver than they feel. He was not afraid. He was paying attention, which was different. When he finished, Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. "You've been watching this for months," Dumbledore said. "Without acting. Without telling anyone." "I told my father," Harry said, and the word came out with the same ease it had in his chest when he'd first tested it, just fitting, just true. "Gomez. He told me not to act until I understood it." "He was right," Dumbledore said. "He was completely right." He was quiet again. "The object beneath the trapdoor," he stopped. "I should tell you what it is." "The Philosopher's Stone," Harry said. "Flamel's Stone. It's the only thing Voldemort would risk this level of exposure for." Dumbledore looked at him. "Wednesday's annotations in the taxonomy book," Harry said. "She's very thorough." Something crossed Dumbledore's face that was, unmistakably, a complicated form of admiration. "You're Wednesday Addams," he said. "She's 11. She'll be 12 in March," Harry said. "Good Lord," Dumbledore said, and it was entirely sincere. He stood and went to his window, which looked out over the grounds, the wide dark lake, the trees, the Quidditch pitch in the distance. Harry watched him and waited. "I've been managing this alone," Dumbledore said. "The stone, Quirrell, the protections, all of it managed alone, because I believed that alone was the safest approach." He turned. "I was wrong about that too, wasn't I?" "You've been wrong about alone for a while," Harry said, and it wasn't harsh. It was just a fact. "Yes," Dumbledore said. "I have." He came back to his desk. "I'm going to act on this tonight. I need to move the stone, I should have moved it already, it was reckless to bring it here, and I need to address Quirrell in a way that's careful about what he's carrying." "He doesn't know, fully, does he?" Harry said. "Quirrell. He let Voldemort in but he doesn't understand what that means." "No," Dumbledore said. "He thought he could use the connection. He's discovered he can't." "Is he dangerous?" Harry said. "He is very dangerous," Dumbledore said. "Which is why I need you to do something extremely difficult." "What?" Harry said. "Nothing," Dumbledore said. "I need you to do nothing. Go to dinner." Do your homework. Trust that I will handle this correctly. He looked at Harry. Can you trust that? Harry thought about it honestly. Yes, he said. But I want to know what happens after. You'll know everything, Dumbledore said. I promise you that. Everything relevant to your safety and your future. No qualifications. No partial truths, Harry said. Dumbledore met his eyes. No partial truths, he said. Harry stood. He was at the door when Dumbledore said, Harry. He turned. The ceiling in the Great Hall, Dumbledore said. You wrote home about it. On your first night. Harry looked at him. You read Gomez's letter, he said. In court. I was in the chamber, Dumbledore said. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. I think about that line fairly often. I thought you should know it's very beautiful. He looked at Harry with something in his face that was too complex for a single word. I am sorry, Harry. That you saw something beautiful and your first instinct was to make sure someone knew. Because no one had ever, he stopped. It's all right, Harry said. It isn't, it is, Harry said. Because someone did know. And they came to the Wizengamot and they said it out loud in front of everyone. He put his hand on the door. That's what matters. Not what it was. What it is now. He went back down the spiral stairs and out through the gargoyle and into the corridor, and the castle moved around him in its Friday afternoon way, students going to afternoon classes, Peeves rattling somewhere in the upper floors, the smell of old stone and dinner beginning somewhere far below. Harry walked. He was not afraid of what was going to happen tonight, whatever Dumbledore did with the stone, whatever came next with Quirrell and Voldemort. He was aware of it the way you're aware of weather, something real, coming, requiring preparation, but not requiring terror. He had the compass in his pocket. He had Gomez's letter next to his chest. He had 3 months of Hogwarts behind him and the full weight of December 23rd ahead of him, and in 30 days he was going to be officially and legally and permanently Harry Addams Potter, which was not a compromise between two identities but the accurate description of one. He found Ron and Hermione in the library. Ron had given up on the essay he was supposed to be writing and was rearranging chess pieces in a pattern he was explaining to Hermione, who was listening with the expression of someone who finds the topic less interesting than the explainer. When Harry sat down, they both looked at him. Good meeting. Ron said. Useful, Harry said. He pulled out his Transfiguration essay. Can I tell you both something? Yes, Hermione said immediately. Yes, Ron said, and pushed the chess pieces aside. Harry told them. He told them about Quirrell and what he'd worked out and what he'd told Dumbledore, and he told them about the stone, and he watched their faces go through the sequence, surprise, then concern, then the particular expression that people wear when they understand that something real and large is happening around them and they're deciding what to do with that. When he finished, Hermione said, You've known about this for months. I was building the picture, Harry said. And you told Dumbledore, Ron said. Tonight he's going to deal with it, Harry said. He asked me to do nothing. I think that's the right call. Ron looked at him. You trust him? My mum told me about the Wizengamot thing, I trust him to do this specific thing correctly, Harry said. Because it's the kind of thing he's genuinely good at, and because he understands now that I'm going to know what happened afterward, and knowing that changes how people do things. He paused. I think. Hermione was quiet in the way she was quiet when she was processing quickly. You're not frightened, she said. No, Harry said. Why not? Harry thought about how to explain it, the particular quality of groundedness that comes from knowing who you are and who is behind you, the way fear requires a certain kind of uncertainty that he had been systematically given reasons not to have. Because I know what happens if this goes badly, he said, and what happens is Gomez comes up here and deals with it personally, and I have watched Gomez deal with things and I'm not worried about the outcome. Ron stared at him. Your dad is that, yes, Harry said simply. Ron sat with this. Brilliant, he said, in the tone of genuine admiration. He really is, Harry said, and went back to his essay. That night, the castle was quieter than usual and Harry lay awake in his bed in the Gryffindor dormitory and listened to the deep stone quiet of Hogwarts at 2 in the morning, the occasional crack of the fire in the common room below, the wind on the tower, the sound of someone's owl leaving a window in the distance. He was awake. Not with fear. With the particular alertness of someone who knows something significant is happening nearby and is at peace with being on the periphery of it. At some point he fell asleep. He dreamed about the kitchen at Privet Drive. Not the Dursleys' version of it, the Addams version, with the herbs and the beetles in their jars on the windowsill and the legal pads and the hum of Morticia's plants and the scratch of Gomez's pen. He dreamed about sitting at the table with his homework and the ordinary extraordinary business of that house going on around him, and in the dream he looked at the window and it was winter outside, snow on the garden, and he thought, this is home, and woke up. December. Outside the dormitory window, the first proper snowfall of the year had arrived in the night, and the grounds were white and the lake was dark and the castle wore the snow the way all very old things wear weather, without drama, having absorbed centuries of it. Harry got up and went to the window. He had his compass in his hand. 40 days to King's Cross. 40 days to the black car and Lurch with his keys and Fester saying something about beetles that would make him laugh immediately, and Pugsley talking about something that had exploded or was about to, and Wednesday standing slightly apart with her notebook, watching him arrive with the specific attention she gave things she found important, which was its own form of welcome. And Gomez. Gomez with the cigar and the perfect suit and the legal pad full of the names of people who had answered for what they'd done, and the voice that said you know who you are, you know who your family is, and the warmth that was not performed because Gomez Addams had never performed anything in his life. And Morticia. Enormously, darling. Harry held the compass and watched the snow. Quirrell came to breakfast looking wrong, pale and diminished in a way that was visible even from across the hall, the specific pallor of someone whose significant ongoing effort has been interrupted. He sat at the staff table and ate nothing and left after 20 minutes, and several teachers watched him go with the careful neutral expressions of people who have been told to watch and say nothing, and Dumbledore was not at breakfast at all. Harry ate his porridge. He looks terrible, Ron said, watching Quirrell go. Yes, Harry said. Do you think? Yes, Harry said. Ron looked at him. You're very calm. Gomez says calm is just another word for prepared, Harry said. Does he actually say that? Hermione asked. More or less, Harry said. He says a lot of things. You'd like him. He reads everything. What does he read? She said. Legal texts, mostly, Harry said. But also history, philosophy, anything involving unusual creatures, 3 languages I've identified and probably more. He considered. He read your copy of Hogwarts, a history when you left it at the house in August. Hermione stared at him. He read he said it was comprehensive but ideologically limited by its institutional perspective, Harry said. He made notes in the margins. I think they're still there. Hermione's expression did the sequence from outrage through interest to something that was quietly delighted. I want to read the notes, she said. I'll ask him to write them up, Harry said. Your family, Ron said, shaking his head, is absolutely not normal. No, Harry agreed. It's great, Ron said. It was 2 days later that Dumbledore came to Harry. Harry was in the library, genuinely reading the Phenomenological Taxonomy, which he'd been working through slowly and carefully, adding his own annotations in a 3rd color, below Morticia's and Wednesday's, and Dumbledore sat across from him without ceremony. It's done, Dumbledore said. Harry set down the book. He looked at Dumbledore's hands, which were resting on the table with the steadiness of someone who has had a significant night and has arrived on the other side of it. Quirrell. Harry said. Dealt with, Dumbledore said. He's gone. The possession, the connection between Voldemort and Quirrell was severed. Quirrell is alive. He's been sent to St. Mungo's. He'll recover physically. And Voldemort? Harry said. Gone, Dumbledore said. Temporarily. He'll find another way, another form, another vessel, another approach. That is the nature of what he is now. But not here. Not tonight. Not for some time. The stone? Destroyed, Dumbledore said. Nicholas Flamel is aware and has accepted the decision. He and his wife are very old and very wise and, he paused, they said something I want to share with you. What? Harry said. He said that to die, after a good long life, surrounded by people who love you, is not the worst thing, Dumbledore said. He said that the worst thing is to live so long that you forget what makes life worth protecting. Harry held this. He was talking about more than himself, Harry said. I believe so, Dumbledore said. He was quiet for a moment. Harry. I need to tell you something about Voldemort. Something I should have told you much earlier and would have told you eventually on my own timeline, which was the wrong approach, and I'm correcting it now. The prophecy, Harry said. I know it. You told me in August. There's more, Dumbledore said. Beyond the prophecy. And he told him. He told him about Horcruxes, the theory of them, the history, the specific horrific logic of what Voldemort had done to himself in pursuit of immortality. He told him about the night at Godric's Hollow and what had happened when the killing curse rebounded, and what he suspected, had suspected for years, had tried not to suspect, had tried to think his way around, about the nature of the connection between Harry and Voldemort. The scar, Harry said. Yes, Dumbledore said. You think part of him is in me, Harry said. Or was. Until tonight. Dumbledore looked at him. It's possible that the severance tonight, the destruction of the connection through Quirrell, may have addressed it. I don't know. It's also possible it's more complex than that. He paused. I want you to know that I am going to investigate this thoroughly, transparently, and in full communication with you and your family. No unilateral decisions. No management of information for your protection. And Gomez, Harry said. He'll be told everything I tell you, Dumbledore said. Simultaneously. Harry looked at the table for a moment. He thought about Horcruxes, the word itself, the concept, the specific ugliness of the thing it described. He thought about Voldemort and the scar and the cold draft that had followed him all term and that had, this morning, been absent for the first time since September. The cold draft was gone. He hadn't noticed until now. He pressed his hand against his forehead, over the scar. It was quiet. It doesn't hurt, he said. No, Dumbledore said. It never hurt before tonight, Harry said. I don't know if that's a good sign or, I believe it's a good sign, Dumbledore said. I hope it's a good sign. I will investigate and tell you what I find. Harry nodded. He looked at Dumbledore and thought about the things Wednesday had said, useful versus dangerous, reconsidering themselves, rarer than it sounds. He thought about the phoenix in the office, the burning and the returning. Professor Dumbledore, he said. Harry. When I was in the cupboard, Harry said, I used to think, that there wasn't going to be anything different. That whatever was happening was just what happened, and there wasn't going to be a door opening. He paused. Wednesday opened the door. That was luck, that she was the one who found the cupboard. But everything after that, that was the people in that house. That was choice. Yes, Dumbledore said. I'm telling you this, Harry said, because I think you made choices that were also choices, not inevitabilities. And you can make different ones. Dumbledore was quiet for a long moment. I intend to, he said. Harry picked up his book. Good, he said. The 23rd of December arrived the way arrival days arrive when they've been anticipated through a long cold term, as morning, ordinary and specific, with a packed trunk and Hedwig in her cage and the excited low-level chaos of Gryffindor Tower clearing out for the holidays. Ron was going home to the Burrow. He gave Harry a handshake that became a hug with the natural ease of someone who does not overthink affection, and said, "Write me. Tell me what explodes." "Something always explodes," Harry said. "I know," Ron said. "That's why I want to know." Hermione was going to her parents, and she hugged Harry with the precise brevity of someone who doesn't perform emotion but means it, and said, "Tell Wednesday I want to read those annotations. Tell her I'll write first." "She'll actually write back," Harry said. "Fair warning." "Good," Hermione said, and looked like she meant it. The Hogwarts Express was boarding at Hogsmeade Station, and the platform was a controlled storm of students and trunks and owls and the particular compressed excitement of people going somewhere they want to go, and Harry stood on the platform with his trunk and his compass and Hedwig and the weight of a good term sitting in him like something well-earned, and he watched the train and thought about the other end. King's Cross, platform 9 3/4, and then beyond the barrier, the ordinary side, the London side, and a black car with brass fittings and Lurch with the keys, and the family standing there, all of them. Gomez had said all of us, and Harry was taking him at his word. He got on the train. He sat in his compartment and watched Scotland go backward past the window, white with December, the light thin and clear, the sky the pale particular blue of cold, and he held the compass and felt it warm in his palm in the way old well-made things warm up, taking on the temperature of the hand that holds them. He thought about his parents. He thought about Lily and James Potter, who had been young and brave and had died for a reason that he was only beginning to fully understand, and he thought about the brass compass that had passed through various channels before Gomez had put it in his hand on a morning in August, and he thought about the vault in Gringotts and the galleon he'd held, and all the things they'd left him that were still being discovered. He was not without them. He never had been. They were in the vault, and the compass and the scar and the wand and the way he looked at things, the patient inventory-taking way, which was Lily's. Dumbledore had told him, the specific quality of that attention. He was theirs. He was also, now, clearly and officially and paperwork confirmedly, Gomez and Morticia's. These things did not contradict each other. They accumulated. He was all of it. All the people who had claimed him and the ones who had been claimed by him in return, and the weight of it was not burden but ballast, the good solid kind that keeps a thing upright in difficult water. The train came into King's Cross at 3:30, and the platform was the ordinary chaos of holiday arrivals, families and trolleys and children running ahead of parents who called after them, and Harry moved through it with his trunk and his owl and came through the barrier onto the Muggle side. He stopped. They were all there. Lurch was at the back with the car, and the car was gleaming in the December grey with the particular self-assurance of a vehicle that knows what it is. Fester was next to the car, wearing something that was technically a coat and had clearly been chosen with zero reference to conventional standards, and he spotted Harry first and waved with his whole arm. Pugsley was beside him, eating something, and his face when he saw Harry broke into the straightforward unreserved grin of someone who doesn't complicate their own happiness, and he dropped whatever he was eating and elbowed Fester, who was already waving. Wednesday was standing slightly apart from them, in her standard arrangement. She looked at Harry when he came through the barrier, and she didn't wave and she didn't run and she didn't do any of the things that arrival scenes in films have people do, but her face, for just a moment, very briefly, in a way that she then entirely controlled, looked like relief. Harry saw it and loved her for it. And then Gomez. He was standing at the front of the group with his hands in his pockets and his cigar unlit in the corner of his mouth, and when Harry came through the barrier their eyes met and Gomez's face did not perform anything at all, it just was what it was, open and warm and completely present, the face of a man who is exactly where he intended to be. He opened his arms. Harry walked into them. The hug was the kind that didn't require explanation or calibration, the kind that simply is what it is, completely, without the slight holding back that uncertainty produces. Gomez hugged him the way he did everything, fully and without reservation, and Harry stood in it and felt the weight of the term and the stone and the Wisengamot and Quirrell and the cold draft that was gone and all of it, and let the weight settle into something it could become, which was past. Behind him, Morticia's hand touched his shoulder briefly, there and gone, like a word said quietly in a loud room, meaning everything precisely because it was quiet. Good term. Gomez said, above his head. Complicated, Harry said, into his shoulder. I know, Gomez said. You'll tell me all of it. Not all of it tonight, Harry said. No, Gomez agreed. Tonight more actions AI chat quick guide, how to get the most out of your membership Claude Sonnet 4.